come back to when I mentioned the video mode in ChatGPT and Gemini, which has voice overlaid. If you just use the voice mode in those assistants, it is remarkably good. It's a fully natural conversation.
Right.
It gets all of the nuances. I really recommend trying it out. But I will say, and this is coming back to networks, there is a tangible difference in your usage of it on a fixed network versus mobile. So if you're using that on the go, even if it is a good 5G connection, you can actually see it stuttering because of jitter and because of latency and so forth.
Oh, well, Ericsson would be delighted to hear you say that.
They probably would.
What you need to do is
more money on their kit.
You need to stand alone.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. We're back on the fucking beers, aren't we, Ian?
Well, seems so. I haven't started one yet.
Well, as we, I think I sort of previewed last week, our friends at PR agency CC Group / Hoffman. It's now officially Hoffman, but I can't get used to it.
No, it's always going to be CC Group.
It's always going to be, yeah.
Sorry, Hoffman.
It's always going to be Twitter, not X.
Exactly.
They generally at the end of January have a sort of start of the year piss up, and they did it. I would have lasted out a week longer, but they did it last night. I couldn't go to it and not drink, and so as far as I'm concerned, the seal's broken now.
Yeah.
Which just as well, I'm delighted to say we got a special guest, Luke Kehoe from Ookla.
Thank you for having me.
And it's a pleasure. And for people who aren't familiar with Ookla, they're an analyst firm, and they also do the speed test app, which is where you get a lot of your sort of data from people using it, don't you? But I'll get you. I'm not going to butcher your company description. And also where former colleague of Ian's and ours and mine from Lightly Reading, Mike Dano's ended up.
A great teammate.
Yeah. He's a good lad. You did well to get him. Before we started recording, I said to Luke, "Tell Mike he's shit," but you're not shit, Mike.
Far from it.
You're great. And Luke's outdone himself. So you've flown over from Ireland. I think you did have some other stuff which we might hear about.
Yeah.
But I like to think that you flew over just for us. and you know that we are inclined to have a tipple on the pod, and you really pushed the boat out. So he bought this.
The best of Ireland in a bottle.
Best of Ireland in a bottle. Connemara peated single malt Irish whiskey.
It's a pretty good slogan, that.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's so good it comes in its own little tube.
And it's green.
Cool.
It's green, yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, I know it's a bit jarring, and Ian and I are a little bit rough around the edges from last night, but, I mean, it'd be rude not to, wouldn't it?
It would. That really was the shortest dry January ever, wasn't it?
I think last year I managed the whole month.
Yeah.
But that was a solid 3 weeks.
I didn't do it last year, so...
Solid. What do you want, blood?
Yeah.
I think second time... Oh, no, you've said that on the Dennis O'Brien podcast once.
Did I?
Where you were like, I didn't make an effort getting dressed. I said, what do you want, blood?
Oh, right. It's just one of my things, as I say.
But for anyone listening, I do recommend Connemara, a beautiful place to visit in Ireland, the West Coast.
Right, is that your roots?
No, so I'm from the southeast of Ireland, a place called Wexford, so just kind of 2 hours south of Dublin. But Connemara, where the Gaeltacht area where Gaelic and Irish is spoken, so beautiful place.
Right, yeah. So I'm a big fan of Ireland. My sister-in-law is from that Wexford area.
Oh, yes,
I think she might have grown up in New Ross. Is that a place?
That's exactly my hometown. Yeah,
oh, is it?
It is.
Actually, no way.
Yeah, and it's the hometown of JFK and the whole JFK. So JFK actually visited New Ross during his presidency, and so everything in the town is called after some Kennedy. But yeah, that's a mad connection now. Thank you.
So yeah.
So Connemara. Oh yeah.
I think
no, it's because
the bottle as well.
That name sounded familiar. There's
Pierre bailed.
There's a famous song from a French guy. He was Armenian, but his name is Charles Aznavour. He's kind of famous. He wrote a song about the lakes of Connemara.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, I heard that name before. Yeah, 1981.
Known for its lakes, is it, Luke?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's very generous.
Thank you. No problem. The least I could do.
I think, as we've mentioned it, we've got to have a little sniff.
Yeah.
Go on, Ian. Be brave. It is PT, as advertised.
It's more like what you'd think of as a kind of Scotch whiskey, because I've not had a PT Irish one before. I've only had the kind of smooth one. So
like Lefroy.
Exactly.
It's like an
Islay. That's really tasty. So the big difference for me between Irish and Scotch is Irish
smell
is
it.
a tiny bit sweeter.
Just wanna smell
Yeah.
it.
It's really good.
It is.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
smoky.
I should get the ball rolling.
In style.
So there we are.
First spirits of the year.
First spirits. So,
Yeah, I've done wine, beer, and now the hard stuff. So
There we are.
it'll be heroin next.
Dry January's in the backdrop.
that'll be our thing. Where you go, you got to do some heroin before you come on the pod.
We all shoot up on the pod, don't we?
Exactly. It's like train spotting the pod.
Transporting? Oh, no, sorry.
Pod spotting, yeah. So yeah, welcome, Luke.
Thank
And yeah, we'll get into whatever your sort of primary areas of interest. I have one sip of whiskey. I can't talk. What am I going to be like in 2 hours? But I also know that I was doing my usual sort of stalking of people on LinkedIn before I meet them. Well, firstly, so what's your job title at Ookla?
So I lead research in Europe, so industry analyst.
So you lead, yeah, and I thought that was incredibly timely. It's not like we planned it that way, but it just so happens in the past week there's been a shitload of Europe sort of
Yes.
telecoms adjacent stuff going on.
Yeah. A dream come true for me.
Yes, indeed. And so that's quite handy.
Yeah.
And I've got to ask, how old are you, Luke?
23.
23. How the fuck are you leading Europe stuff at Ookla at 23?
It's good question. It's a good question. From a young age.
I'm not saying you don't deserve it, but it's a good effort
Thank
for
you.
23.
He's wicked
No.
smart.
Yeah.
Far from it. No, it's
Don't want to compare with what I was up to when I was 23. It certainly wasn't anything so lofty.
no. It's a long. Since I was in early secondary school, I was always really interested initially in the smartphone market. That's when there was big year-on-year changes, obviously in form factor and advancement and all. And so I set up a website.
Yes.
Wow.
In September 2008.
God.
Yes. At that point, with the help of my father.
How old are you? Like 5 or something?
So set up a website and kind of started to write a little bit about kind of phones.
Wow,
Now,
good
very,
effort.
very primitive, very nascent, very basic.
Well, that's all right because you were like 5 years old or something. So,
And then one day actually I sent an email to this woman, Anne O'Leary. She was the CEO of Vodafone in Ireland at the time. She's now with Meta, leads Meta in Ireland and Europe. And I asked her, could you send me out some phones to review in the post? And she did.
Wow.
And so I created the website and started to review some phones.
And you actually reviewed them. It wasn't just a cheeky way of getting a cheap phone,
No, I
free
actually
phone.
was just genuinely passionate about it. And from there, Vodafone invited me into their network team and met with them, and the other operators in Ireland and did similar.
so you must have been really young when this was going
Very
on.
young, so it was probably they probably thought, who on earth is this coming in the door here? This young chap with no idea. But I have to say, give them huge credit for spurring that interest, and really from there, I kind of started to write on LinkedIn, and other companies got an interest, and one or two came and said, would you be interested in doing some work for us, consultancy work? So got involved.
Really?
Yes, yeah, that's kind of where it went. So before Ookla, I was kind of working on a consultancy basis with doing projects for some of the operators in Ireland, one or two say antenna vendors.
Don't take this the wrong way, Luke. What were they consulting you on?
So it's a good question. So there was kind of two. There was say the private sector side, where I would say it was kind of due diligence. So companies going to move into this market. Could you produce some information on whether it's investable? So looking at the tower assets, all this, their portfolio, their competitive position. One or two were interested in revenue diversification. I'm sure they're probably still interested in that.
Yeah.
Given how things have gone, and they were looking at what insights could I bring from other markets say Korea and places like that. And then we, one big project actually with local authorities, and with Dublin in particular, where they were setting up this whole new way of working with telecoms operators to be more proactive. They set up a telecoms unit, really a global leader. So we worked on stuff with the World Economic Forum and stuff. Best case example showing how Dublin was leading in connectivity.
More on them later.
More on them later.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Well, nice one. So, I mean, it's really nice to hear actually that if you're good enough, you're old enough, sort of thing.
Hopefully.
And you obviously are were more industrious than a typical person of your age.
Don't know about that.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I met you in Ireland like 2 years ago,
Hughes,
probably. So you would only have been 21 then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well.
Okay, thank you.
And I was thinking, he can't have been in the industry that long, and he knows a lot about it. And obviously, you have been in the industry for a long time, like 15 years or something already. So.
One of the best pieces of advice I got, I remember 1 or 2 years ago. Thank you. Someone said to me, "Luke, you need to grow a beard if you want to be taken seriously."
Indeed.
And so that's exactly what I did. So
I would have made you sort of mid to late 20s because of the beard.
Yes, with the beard. Yeah, it does add years. Yeah.
And it's close to being a proper beard. My rule on beards is you can't be able to see the skin underneath. So, actually, Pierre, you've let yours grow a little bit more. It's slightly more beardy now. And you're about similar to Pierre in terms of...
I think Pierre looks the Irish colour to his...
Got a bit of ginge going on.
Celtic.
Yeah.
We were out last night with our former colleague and former regular contributor to this podcast, Jamie Davis, who's now at Nokia, and he's got a proper beard.
His beard's huge. It's got bigger.
Is it like Brian Blessed?
It is like a Brian Blessed beard.
That's a Brian Blessed level of stuff. I mean, there's probably little ecosystems in that beard.
Yeah.
Zangief. And he's got a nest in there.
Sort of.
It's like something out of a Roald Dahl book, you know.
Yeah. Yes. Jamie's magnificent beard.
I hope Jamie's not listening to this because we're going to be in trouble.
I don't think we've said anything horrible about his beard. We've just said it is
a fabulous beard. I mean, if I had any chance of...
I think we've been very kind about his beard. And we saw him last night, so we should give another shout out to CC/Hoffman for hosting everyone. It was well attended. It was a nice full room.
Yeah.
Lots of telecoms hacks and analysts and all that jazz. And saw Rich and Paul for the first time in a while.
About a year.
Is it? Is that the last time we saw him?
Probably.
Right. They're definitely sort of gone off the radar a little bit since they were acquired, but hopefully one or both of them a bit more.
Well, one of them has been off the radar because he had an accident with his knee.
Poor old Paul had a tree fall on his leg, didn't he?
And so he's just not been out and about very much. I guess that's one of the reasons.
Yeah.
He had a what?
Tree fall on his leg. I mean, he did it. I think he was cutting it down and it fell on his leg. Or something like that. But he was really badly hurt. He's in hospital for ages,
It's one of those things that could have turned up on the Darwin Awards, you know.
Oh, like shattered his bone and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
he's only just like, he still was saying he can't run on it yet. He can walk on it, but it still requires some physio.
So good to have you back, Paul. And if it sounded like I was making light of your incident, I didn't mean it.
Well, the thing that I was surprised about was the fact that he seems just as slim as he did before it. Because I don't know if it was me and I'd been laid up on a sofa for doing jigsaw puzzles. I'd be about 30 stone heavier. So
well, he's still off the booze, isn't he? So that will help.
Yeah.
I haven't weighed myself. I don't know if 3 weeks off of booze has made any difference.
I've lost some weight, but I don't think it's necessarily just doing no drinking. I've been trying to sort of get out and do some exercise. So
good stuff.
But I've not lost a ton, but it's some. So just need to keep it up.
Indeed.
Really.
Before we go any further, I'm delighted to announce that this podcast has a sponsor. Unperturbed by our unorthodox style, Cohere Technologies has decided to take the plunge. For any listeners that missed our previous pods with its CEO, Cohere is the innovator behind Universal Spectrum Multiplier software for 4G and 5G and Pulsone technology for 5G and 6G coexistence, ISAC and NTN. Thanks a lot, Cohere. Your support is much appreciated. So,
I need to do a shout out.
Yeah, I'll just quickly finish off. Thanks to, I'll name check, Katie, Zoe, Adam, Chris.
Ben.
And we met Ben as well.
Ben Burwell.
Ben Burwell, who makes you look like a granddad.
Ben is very young. Yeah, I know all of them. They're all great. Zoe and,
so anyway, I just wanted to give a shout out to everyone there, and sorry anyone I missed. What were you going to say, Ian?
I was going to say the day before that, which is when my dry January ended.
Yeah. Oh yes.
I was at an Ericsson lunch, which we were going to do around Christmas time, but I think other things got in the way. So they had it on Wednesday at a place called Sushi Samba.
Yeah, I think I've been to Sushi Samba. It was.
It's like the UK team. It's Ericsson UK. Interestingly, they don't have a CEO at the moment. They're sort of CEO-less.
Catherine.
She's moved on. It's UK Ireland, isn't it?
Yeah. But it was a really nice meal, and cool. I was sitting next to a lady called Patricia Dooley, who's like head of government affairs. And
I think I've met her at one of those lunches.
She's really nice.
Yeah.
So shout out to Patricia.
Right, if it is you that I met before, hello again.
Had a really good chat with her. Like the 3 hours just went really quickly, and chatted to Bassem a bit as well. He's the guy who's head of networks for Northern Europe.
Cool.
He was he's one of the most senior executives there. But it's really good. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, nice one, Ericsson. If a bit late. And we'll be talking more about Ericsson later as well, because they've just come out of their quarterlies, and that's what Ian and I were writing about this morning. So it's still fresh in our minds.
Did you see the Intel ones?
Yes,
minus 14%.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to look at them yet.
The missed earnings. Yeah.
They're just having a mare.
Over the year they're doing pretty great.
Yeah.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, brilliant. They've over 40 or
they've done all right because of the Nvidia and SoftBank investments.
And
yes, indeed.
Trump. Yeah.
And Scott, also, do you remember, like, we always go over, like, if only we had invested in this company a year ago?
Yes.
I'll give you one right now. SanDisk, who makes
over 1,000%.
Makes the memory card in this camera.
Because the memory market's gone mad, hasn't it?
Jesus Christ.
HBM, NAND.
So if you bought it in July, this last summer, $43. Now it's at $481.
What the fuck?
Yes.
I think it's because they're featured in the TV series Pluribus, where she records videos and puts them on SanDisk memory cards and then sends them out by drones to other people.
SanDisk is the standard for camera memory cards.
Yeah, SanDisk's been a known quantity for decades.
But they split from Toshiba or whatever, not so long ago. Yeah.
And Western Digital.
Oh, sorry, it's from WD,
Yeah. And it's a big.
Not Toshiba.
That's actually a really important point, because I think it's maybe a third order impact, but the impact on the smartphone market and even on operators will be significant. If you think of a fixed CPE, FWA, all of that, the bill of materials is going to go up substantially. You've seen founder of Nothing, Carol Pay, come out during the week around the squeeze on the low end, mid end smartphone market.
Yeah.
So I think anyone in the consumer hardware business is going to be hammered over the next year or two. Even beyond SanDisk, Micron's
huge
and US backed. So there's a US supply chain. SK Hynix.
So what is the? Because this is quite a big issue, but it's slightly out of my area because it's more devices, I guess. But The Economist did write about this sort of massive increase in memory prices. Yes. But is it just
supply?
Things are being diverted into other areas, and therefore it's caused a kind of crunch in this bit of the market.
Well, and it seems to apply to both types of memory, because memory's a slightly ambiguous term in computing, isn't it? Because you can be talking about flash memory, which is used for storage, or you can talk about RAM.
Yes.
And what's this? This is both.
Yeah, this is both. But it's interesting that both, and both of them seem to be being driven largely by this AI sort of gold rush. But it's interesting that both are getting a boost. But it may be this memory, this storage part of it's going up even more if SanDisk aims to go by.
We need to go further up the food chain for the next stock then. What is SanDisk using?
Yes, indeed.
It's going to be a squeeze.
Well, this is one of the problems with being a retail investor, is that experts will have worked that shit out years ago, and it will already be priced into the stock.
Well, it's a good question, because if you look at, there are so many different companies. So you mentioned what are they dependent on. There are companies, I know there's one in Japan, I believe, that they're main businesses like toilet paper and baby goods, but they also produce very thin sheet glass. And these companies are actually, now there's a huge shortage of this because it's going into the hyperscalers and into the AI supply chain. So you've seen these companies that are, have seen explosions in small Japanese companies, South Korean, others. I think on the HBM side, the high bandwidth memory, part of this, why it's driving up the rest of the memory stock as well, is that they're starting to reconfigure the use of the memory so you can stack it to be used as a high HBM stack.
Or the flash.
Exactly, yeah, similar to that.
So there's a blurring of that boundary that I just described.
Exactly,
okay, that's interesting.
Exactly. And what's driving that really is the move to larger context AI models. So you hear like, Google come out with, 1 million context tokens or whatever. So in other words, the model can be more context aware. So rather than being able to interpret, a 1,000-page document, it can maybe do 5,000 pages. And to move towards the agentic systems, whereby you have, multi-step reasoning, you need to have a much larger context window.
I see.
It's the agentic push that's really driving the HBM explosion in costs and so forth. So that's why, yeah.
I can see now why he got his job. So
the,
he was talking about
the impact on like ordinary consumers, people going out and shopping for new smartphones, is that going to? I mean,
definitely,
people are going to end up paying a lot more for a new iPhone in the next few months.
100%, and maybe the device that they may get may not be as full featured as it would have been if this kind of wave didn't happen. Carl Pei made an interesting point. So he's the founder and CEO of Nothing, formerly OnePlus,
which I think is a silly name.
It is. I agree with you. Yes, but it is. But maybe that's part of the appeal of the brand.
It makes us remember it.
Exactly.
He might as well have called it shite.
No publicity is bad publicity. But he makes a point that, like, if you look at the cost curve for like virtually all smartphone tech over the last 10, 15 years, it has followed a linear trajectory downwards. So better components at a lower price.
Yeah.
This is the first year that cycle is going to break.
I see.
Because of this tightness across the whole ecosystem.
Right.
It's funny. Wow. Apple has always had eye-watering margins on memory, so maybe they'll just eat into that a bit.
Yeah. And that will help them. Yeah.
And swallow some of it.
They just got ahead of it by charging so much more already.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just wishful thinking at this point.
No, I think that's probably a good point, though. They'll be able to absorb some of the cost and not pass all of it on. Because if you're trying to pass the whole thing on, people just aren't going to buy your stuff.
Yes.
But the thing is, how much in the total price of a phone, you might know this, how much are we talking is the memory?
It's a good question. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I believe like you're talking, like I know Samsung has come out in the last week, even with for some memory modules, like 80% price increases. Like we're talking about staggering levels of.
But that's a good portion of the bill of materials. I don't know. Yeah. I'll Google it. You should be doing this, Jamie.
We can ask a human.
Yeah.
Sizable now, I would imagine.
So, because you're interested in the smartphones, which is the thing that you got you into this market in the first place years ago when you were just a kid, has that carried over into other kind of form factors now? Are you like looking at things like smart glasses? And
I think so. Yeah, I think the smart glass space is very interesting. Other form factors, obviously VR had its moment and is kind of in this kind of transition phase now where we're waiting for the next thing. I think the interesting thing on the AI side now at the moment that everyone's waiting for is like these smart pins.
Yeah.
So Apple now in the last few days have reported they're working on.
And there's that one that Johnny Ive and
Sam Altman.
That photo they took of themselves.
A little like Simon and Garfunkel.
Shop,
where they're sort of hugging each other.
Yeah. Simon and Garfunkel.
Made me want to self-harm when I watched it. Yes.
It's about 2 to 4%.
Okay, and I wonder what it will be after this.
No, as in, as in the memory cost. Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Okay, go on. Sorry.
Yeah. No, but that's interesting. Okay.
No,
so do you have like a view on the, when we talk about things like smart glasses, and I mean, there's loads of talk about this on the Ericsson call, uplink, and I think Michael Thelander at Signals came out with a report this week saying, sort of downplaying it, and people like William Webb and Dean Bubley have been quite sceptical about this idea that use of smart glasses and some of this physical AI stuff's necessarily going to do that much on the uplink. But has Ookla got a kind of a view on that, or done research?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's something that obviously, I suppose as a leader in measuring networks, we're really interested in, what way this is going to go. To be honest with you, I'll be very frank, I think there's still huge uncertainty.
Yeah.
And whether the balance of change will go towards uplink latency. I think one of the big areas that's under discussed is maybe fragments of it coming out this week you mentioned is around signalling.
Yeah.
The signalling burden.
Yeah.
So I suppose the analogy I would give is you can imagine the networks today as being, you order a batch of coffee and it comes by truck in bulk,
right?
Like a Netflix video or whatever. If you have an AI agent that's running for, maybe 10 minutes, it's doing hundreds and hundreds of different tool calls. That is like an espresso shop, whereby you're going in for multiple different espressos. The cashier is overloaded if they don't have the requisite kind of ability to support that. That's kind of the signalling chatter that we talk about.
Yeah.
That you move from today, you send one query to ChatGPT and the latency doesn't matter so much in the signalling. But if you have agents that are interacting with each other, doing calls.
It might,
change.
So that just amplifies whatever delays.
Exactly.
Because at each stage of the interaction, the delay
building up, so
manifests itself.
Almost like kind of a super exponential curve.
It's like someone cocking up a baton change in a relay race or something.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah. But by the way, Karen, Luke,
thanks. Again, like I would say on the glasses side, there's a few things that need to be resolved there. I know Ericsson and others talk about, these will have big pressure on the network. I would say we have seen no example of a glass device with a cellular modem, for instance.
Right.
These are either offloaded.
They're too sort of bulky at the moment, aren't they? If you try and do it,
power, the economics. They're usually offloaded to the smartphones.
And that's been the case with smart peripherals forever, isn't it?
Exactly. Smart watches even.
I remember I was an analyst back in the day, a place called Strategy Analytics, and smartphones was my area, and we were looking at wearables as well. And I always thought that the concept, if you accept that you're going to have a smartphone, and you've got Bluetooth connectivity and you can even tether, that getting any peripheral with its own autonomous connectivity seemed pointless to me.
Yeah, you're duplicating costs.
And obviously the components have got to be in there, which make it heavier.
I think it's going to be very hard to get someone to pay a monthly subscription for smart glasses if they're already paying sort of 30 or 40 quid for a good smartphone to sort of, I mean, this is the dream obviously of companies like obviously the operators, but Ericsson, because they want their customers to do well, is the new devices is going to be a new subscription, but I just don't see it working that way. If
they get into full sort of Terminator level heads up display augmented reality type of thing, then maybe, I mean, I know I feel like I'm a bit too much of an old git to adapt to something like that, but maybe younger generations, it will become normal. I don't know.
What I'd say is, I don't know, have you...
Talking about younger generations.
Have either of you used the Gemini Live or ChatGPT video mode? So I don't know if any of you used it, but it is absolutely fascinating. And I think, like, for me, that is the most tangible evidence of where we're going.
Just briefly describe what it does.
So you go into the app, Gemini or GPT or whatever, you hold up your device, say we hold it up here on the room. I could say to it, draw a box around the Ethernet port that you see in the frame, right? So it interprets and understands, and this is where I suppose a lot of the frontier AI labs are moving towards world models, so moving away from LLMs and towards systems that actually understand the world. And I suppose that's
visual. Well, this is what isn't it what Demis Hassabis had to go about today? He's like, ChatGPT is all a load of crap. We should be thinking about world models. You're not going to get to AGI with ChatGPT, which I could have told them 2 years ago. But
Jensen Huang was saying that they had solved vision, as they call it. But I don't know about that.
Interesting. The world models, I suppose, would be seen as like a precursor for obviously robotics and humanoid. And you look at, so Google have their own bespoke line of models now for robotics as well that they're developing. And I think robotics is a really fascinating area that's going to start moving very quickly.
Scott doesn't like that.
Just fucking calm down, everyone.
But I think there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff happening there, and potentially will be impactful for economies like Europe, where the demographic pyramid may require big advancement in the robotic space, and it could be very helpful. So that's side tangent, but very.
Are you talking about like old people having
when you need taking to the toilet in future, Scott? When you're in the Rose and Crown, you need a bit of help.
Right.
I'm not going to be doing it, so. You're going to need a connected humanoid.
China's
robo nanny
aging as well, right?
Yes, and the replacement rate. You saw the statistics just came out actually this week from I think the Chinese government around the population, and it's going down more rapidly than people thought it would.
Yeah.
If you look at South Korea, I believe cities like Busan, it's a cliff edge scenario. What they're facing, much worse even than China. And they're starting from a lower base of population,
Isn't it a bit of a disaster in Japan's got this sort of reluctance to produce new people.
Yes,
that Demis Hassabis thing is interesting, actually. I hadn't spotted it.
Deep mind.
Yeah. This is me reading a sort of account of it. But he said on a podcast, today's large language models are phenomenal at pattern recognition. but they don't understand causality. They don't really know why A leads to B. They just predict the next token based on statistical correlations. And I guess that's where he's suggesting this world.
Well, I think he's always been quite negative towards large language models and the transformer thing that Google came up with in the first place, because they tried to go about their route to AGI in a completely different way. They were the original kind of champions of the push towards AGI, and then Sam Altman kind of came along and took something that Google had developed and ran with it and turned it into a large language model. But Demis Hassabis was always really kind of down on the notion in the first place because they hadn't done that stuff themselves. So
I was chatting with Luke, I think just before you arrived, Ian, and we were talking about this topic and how, I think at Davos, there will have been the usual utopian stuff about when AGI is going to come along and how it's going to fucking change everything. I'm very sympathetic. I'm very sympathetic. I mean,
end of scarcity, end of humans.
Yes, well, indeed. Obviously, I completely defer to Demis Hassabis, and he's not waiting for my endorsement of his position. But it seems likely and rational and plausible to me that just scaling what we currently do isn't going to go from what he just described, a very good predictive model, as Ian and I have argued the toss about lots of times on this pod. Ian just calls it like a sort of search engine on steroids, don't you?
Yeah, autocomplete on steroids, I think.
Right, yeah, well, autocomplete. How just scaling alone is going to turn that into proper AGI. It seems implausible to me.
And that is the critical question, is there a wall to RL and, I know X and XAI, just Elon announced in the last week, they've just launched the first gigawatt training cluster in Tennessee. I know there's been a lot of local kind of pushback on that there with obviously the use of, natural gas turbines and all this stuff locally. But they're moving at sonic speed. They're expecting 1.5 gigawatt data center by the end of this year. Like, you're moving towards data center clusters for training that are comparable in power demand to a city like Amsterdam. In a single,
that's incredible.
Which is incredible, and you can actually almost draw so far a straight line in terms of the linear progression, almost like Moore's law, but for the actual gigawatt scale of these training clusters from the frontier labs. So yeah, it's moving very quickly, and I wouldn't underestimate the power of that. Compounding over time and how quickly it's moving. Yeah.
No, it's definitely moving quickly. It's just that AGI endpoint still seems a little bit
nebulous.
A bit speculative. Yeah. But everyone goes on about it, and you got people like, I don't know what you think, but you got people like Sam Altman who are constantly incredibly utopian about this stuff.
Yeah. Well,
and I think maybe they should just take it down a notch. I know he's got to get massive investment and all that sort of thing.
And OpenAI are in a very difficult spot now. I mean, bleeding cash. It's funny, you look at, if you obviously, as everyone has noted, if you go back a year or two, you would have said, God, they're in a really strong position. They have 800 million plus daily active or monthly active users. This is a platform for launching advertising, which they're now doing, but their burn rate is very high. They've obviously shed top tier talent to some of the other frontier labs.
Well, they're getting them back now.
They're getting them back from
drama with
Mira Murati, thinking machines.
There we go. Yeah, there's been some drama there.
Some drama.
It's a bit like Tories defecting to reform.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. But the Anthropic model seems to be doing very well. So Dario, obviously, they've put everything behind enterprise.
Yeah, and coding assistance.
Coding. I believe coding, like you look at the rise of Claude Code.
I guess he was there in OpenAI at the beginning, wasn't he? So he's just gone and taken off the stuff that he was actually working on and taken it somewhere else. So
we've it's funny, we've basically sort of done a whole segment there completely spontaneously. It's not something we planned to chat about,
but fascinating.
But it's very interesting. I'm just thinking, like, when I publish it, I have to say what we spoke about. I think the first segment I'm just going to put Ookla and let that cover everything. But one thing I wanted to finish off, we were talking about the bill of materials of memory in a smartphone. Well, IDC has published a pretty good piece, actually. It's December the 18th, so I missed it because I was larking about being off on holiday. But it's a pretty comprehensive piece talking about this stuff.
Scott?
Yeah, not reading about smartphone bill of material over the Christmas break.
Probably listen to podcasts.
But they've given a lot of data away for free in this. So the IDC piece is called Global Memory Shortage Crisis, Market Analysis and the Potential... They could do with trimming down their headlines a little bit. Market Analysis and the Potential Impact on Smartphone and PC Markets in 26. Anyway, I did it just by Googling the bill of materials thing, and they say... I'll read it verbatim. They say the cost structure of a smartphone is heavily dependent on the memory used. For a mid-range device, memory can represent 15 to 20% of the total bill of materials, while for high-end flagship devices, it's around 10 to 15%. So if we take 15 as the middle point, that's a big chunk of the bill of material, and if that doubles,
then it's huge. Yeah.
And if you let's say a high-end device, let's say you're paying an average about 800 quid, allowing for iPhones being a bit more expensive. 15% of 800 is about 20. No, sorry, 200.
Come on, Scott, you talk maths.
I know. I don't know. I've had a complete brain fart on it.
You're gonna have to want to edit this bit out.
50% of 800 is 80 plus 40, 120. There we go. I just had brain seizure there. So, 120 quid, that's a big chunk of the money.
It is a big chunk. And this is going to obviously have a much more disproportionately large impact on entry-level, mid-level that as you mentioned, can't absorb the cost as well as the high-end. But also I think this has important implications. There's a lot of focus from the likes of Qualcomm, given their business, on edge inference and inference at the edge. How viable is that in the short to medium term if the costs are so extraordinary for storage? I do wonder. I think this pushes out kind of the idea of being able to run models locally by a year or 2 or 3 years because there's such a stress there on the memory market.
Presumably the likes of Samsung and these other more specialist ones, but the manufacturers, presumably they're ramping up capacity. Although, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because I certainly know that...
But it'll take that a long time to happen.
Exactly, and also both the NAND and the RAM markets... It's very commoditized and very volatile, isn't it?
This is what happens.
So you don't want to overexpand.
Exactly.
This is the history of the chip market. It's all cyclical. It's like you go through a glut and then
so you don't want to get too carried away with capacity.
No, that's a challenge. You don't want to overbuild.
Exactly. Yeah. Interesting. Well, we might come back to that, but I want to move on.
They might have overbuilt in the
stage.
wrong areas. A lot of this planned investment in the sort of fabs that can do what TSMC is doing for. For 2 nanometer, 3 nanometer stuff, there's like loads of money going into that, isn't there? How long before a certain president goes, we've got to have all the flash? It's a strategic necessity that we own the flash.
I on that point, Micron, I suppose, fits that candidate, as in they're US based, it's partly US supply chain, and that's part of the reason I think that the stock. The valuation of Micron has gone up so much more than SK Hynix, even if SK Hynix is probably just as positively impacted by the AI cycle. It's that US anchoring of the US capital market relative to
did people see this coming? Presumably not, because of what's happened.
In July it was a tenth of what it is now, so it's started late.
I think those weird, definitely did. Yeah, I think
it's weird that it's such a late surge.
AI was a big deal in July, you know what I mean?
It certainly was. Yes. Another thing I was mentioning to you, someone I don't know if you were familiar with, Luke, but I recommend him, who also gives away free research that's pretty good. A chap called Richard Windsor, who's got a site called Radio Free Mobile. And he talks a hell of a lot about the economics of AI. And he had a couple this week on 21st, so 2 days ago. His one was called Artificial Intelligence Crazy Economics. And then yesterday he followed up with artificial intelligence bubble scenario. And he's just got some interesting sort of, I think he's a former equity analyst, so he's used to crunching the numbers.
Nomura, he used to work for.
He's used to crunching the numbers. And he's got things, I won't go through it all now, but I recommend it to you and to our audience. I've recommended him plenty of times on this pod as a source of free, good insight. He's great. But he's talking about, the key metrics, like the cost per whatever increment of
per token.
Cost per token, and then also he's talking about the economics of building data centers and the cost per gigawatt and that sort of thing.
I think he does quite a good job of saying what people would have to be realising in improvements who are actually using AI. Because the big story's been it's been great for the hyperscalers and Nvidia, but nobody else really seems to be feeling this. Like, hey, where's this productivity boost from ChatGPT and everything? Like, he's quite good on that side of it.
And he mentions that typically these big LLM companies generate about $10 billion per gigawatt of compute capacity.
Right.
But he said that the cost of building that gigawatt is going up. And
more than 10 billion.
Yeah, he goes. He says, I'll quote one of his bullet points. The cost to build 1 gigawatt of capacity is growing and now sits at roughly $35 to $50 billion per gigawatt, up from around $22 billion per gigawatt in 23. So in just 2.5 years, let's say, it's kind of doubled. And part of that will be what we were just talking about with the cost of commodities like memory. And then he goes on to just talk about how much money OpenAI has got to make per user in order to just fucking break even, let alone make a profit. And he just doesn't think it's adding up.
Yeah, OpenAI, I suppose, is the one there that is, as we mentioned, under a lot of pressure for various reasons. That's why I suppose the hardware project needs to be successful. With Johnny Ive and so forth.
Yeah.
They don't have the free cash flow that Google can rest on, or Meta. Meta, there's a lot of talk around, obviously Meta's share price hasn't done so well recently, and obviously Zuckerberg has bet the house on his super intelligence labs, Alexander Wang, all these others.
The metaverse kind of forgotten for now, isn't it?
Forgotten for now. But he has, like Meta is such a hugely profitable entity, printing cash. They have a core product, so they can afford to.
No, I still don't quite get how they make so much money.
Advertising,
yeah. But I mean, does anyone use Facebook anymore?
Well, Instagram.
It's Instagram.
Instagram is
WhatsApp.
Cash cow, WhatsApp. Yeah,
but they don't make money out of WhatsApp.
Yeah, there's
WhatsApp
like a little bit.
Oh, enterprise. Yeah. Okay. They certainly don't monetize me, and I guess I'm the last person to talk about it because I don't use Instagram at all. I stopped using Facebook.
Threads is their, I suppose, ex-competitor.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'll take your word for it. They're making lots of money. It's just like you can see with Google. I'm constantly interacting with Google. I can see how they make money.
Yeah.
It's just harder for me to just visualize the revenue streams for Meta. But obviously, I just need to look at their numbers.
Opening, I think it was a big blow as well that Apple chose Gemini for Siri.
Yeah, definitely.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I suppose, you'd have to wonder, is it, okay, technical capability is one thing. They're obviously impressed by the Google one. I wonder how much...
Relationships.
Yeah, that's the relationship thing, I think.
I wonder as well how much did like the legacy of, say, the search contract as well have a role there. Obviously, Google were paying Apple to be the default.
Well, Google can tie its AI to its existing search engine, whereas ChatGPT is just an AI.
Maybe it's just a straight trade-off. They're like, all right, we'll cancel out what you pay us to have us as the default search, and you give us some AI.
Maybe, yeah.
They just did a deal in a pub one day.
Yes, and I'm sure Apple can have a lot more confidence that Google is much more likely to remain solvent in the longer term.
That's a very good point. And also, while it's a sort of frenemies thing, they obviously compete with Android and iOS, and they've certainly snarled at each other in the past, but they're, big companies are pragmatic. They'll do business with whoever.
Exactly, yeah. And Apple, like the long-term vision for Apple, I think, is to move toward their own, like they're already developing their own foundation model. So this is a stepping stone for them,
I still felt like a slight humiliation for them.
Of course, yeah.
In having to lean on that. But given that they were pioneers with Siri, it was a rare example. It's actually when I was smartphone analyst, when Siri first came out, it was a rare example. Normally Apple's late to market, but just tries to be better than everyone else. Whereas Siri, it was quite early to market, and it was a bit shit.
iPhone 4S?
I think so. Yeah, around that time. There we are.
Yeah.
You're playing with it next to your Star Wars figures.
But that was pre a lot of the things that happened that kind of changed the conversation about AI, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was before the Transformer was sort of invented.
Yes.
So,
No, it's definitely pre the modern AI era.
Completely revolutionised chatbots.
Totally, but I'm just saying, it was just surprising. It was quite early. They were calling it AI at the time.
Yeah, but it would have looked good at the time compared with now. It doesn't.
I seem to remember it didn't really ever take off. People were pretty sceptical about it from the off.
But they were
with
none
Siri.
of them. None of them were very good though back then.
I mean, you two are both Apple users. Do you use Siri much? Have you ever?
I mean, I've never used it. I don't really like the idea of chatbots anyway.
Yeah,
I would have been surprised if you'd fully embraced it.
A voice recognition in the Apple CarPlay. That was one thing that you actually talked to Siri.
Yeah.
But if you were driving and wanted to know how old was, I don't know.
I mean,
Gandhi when he died, you could ask Siri, whatever.
I know this. If you've got Spotify set up and you've got it in your home system, and you go to Spotify, play Coldplay. Well, you wouldn't say that. You'd say play AC/DC on.
Guns N'
whatever,
Roses.
Guns N' Roses on the living room speakers, and like go over to my friend's house and he's got all this, and it's like this is great.
Yes,
but
that's Alexa,
and that's about as useful as it gets for me. I think
you could
beyond
ask
that.
You
I'm
ask
not really
the weather.
The
weather.
Or I could just open my.
I'll use Alexa for
up and look at the
because it's in my
app.
kitchen.
Oh.
So I run out of something and I could just out loud say, "Hey, put this on the shopping list." And
This so Luke mentioned the emerging wearables like pins and smart little
apparently
things
Apple is working on one. Sorry,
Apple's working on one, and as we said, OpenAI is with Johnny Ive, and that ultimately that's going to be about voice UI. What underpins all of this stuff is we're used to the Touch UI. The Touch UI came around with iOS and Android in like 2007, whenever that was. And Touch UI is what we're used to, but Voice UI, obviously, if you've got something that's on you, whether it's glasses or a pin or some other wearable, or you're using it in the car, you're not using the Touch UI, you're using voice. And I think where AI and might come into its own is where if the Voice UI is incredibly useful and effortless and intuitive.
And I would say come back to when I mentioned the video mode in ChatGPT and Gemini, which has voice overlaid. If you just use the voice mode in those assistants, it is remarkably good. It's a fully natural conversation.
Right.
It gets all of the nuances. I really recommend trying it out. But I will say, and this is coming back to networks, there is a tangible difference in your usage of it on a fixed network versus mobile. So if you're using that on the go, even if it is a good 5G connection, you can actually see it stuttering because of jitter and because of latency and so forth.
Oh, well, Ericsson would be delighted to hear you say that.
They probably would.
What you need to do is
more money on their kit.
You need standalone. Come on, you need to roll that mid-band radio.
But it's true because it's going to the cloud. So it's signaling their jitter, latency. Yeah, so that is an area where it does actually make a tangible difference. Now, how much will go to the cloud, how much will stay on device, that's the question, obviously, moving forward.
There's that company that tried it already, the Bunny, whatever, and they failed miserably.
Oh, I know the one you're on about.
There's a company called Bunny.
Well, that's where they went wrong.
Rabbit, sorry.
Rabbit, yeah, there was something like Rabbit. Yeah.
But because
Bunny, bless him.
You're talking about... You said what did you say? UI, you said?
Voice UI.
Voice UI. I think it's more, we like a display UI rather. Like we like to watch stuff.
Yeah.
And
but that's the thing.
Device
That's
is not
my
going to
point.
give you that.
If we can, I was actually chatting to my son about this earlier because he's working for a company called Which right now. And he was doing some training on AI and he was just talking, I won't reveal too much and I don't want to get him in trouble. I mean, he wasn't saying anything particularly contentious. But I was saying to him, yeah, he's got the same reservations that we have about the boundaries of what AI should be. Is it just a search engine on steroids, or is it something more superpowered than that? And how much should you use it? And culturally, one problem I have with using voice UI is I just feel weirded out by chatting to a machine like a person.
Yeah.
And that one thing I was saying to Jack, my son, is like I think part of this training and part of the evolution is people are going to have to be trained culturally and socially to interact with machines in different ways. In ways that old gits like us here, and we'll be like, I'm not happy about that at all.
I mean, it's too late for me.
It's too late for me.
You sound like
Darth Vader.
I'm very skeptical about the
There's
pin.
good in you, Ian. Sorry, go on.
I'm skeptical about the pin because two things. If it works, it will not replace the phone. It will be with the phone like an Apple Watch or whatever.
Accessory.
But also, imagine like right now in this room, if we all had our pins looking at each other and recording us.
Body cam.
Do you feel like, I'm going to be careful with what I say? I don't know.
Totally. Well,
it's weird.
I mean, in this particular environment, we don't have to worry because we're recording it and we're going to stick it on the internet. But I know what you mean.
I think we would ask people,
but in normal life,
at the door.
Yes,
there's massive privacy implications to all this, no doubt.
Like, oh, I'm sorry, can you please cover your... so many issues will be like, where you're talking to me, can you please cover this?
And same with the Ray-Bans, Meta Ray-Bans. I think people notice. Yeah, people notice, and they don't want to be... I think there's definitely a generational divide here as well, in that I think that younger people are used to almost always having a camera out.
Digital native, all that sort of thing.
Exactly, Which is not necessarily a good thing.
I thought Dean, just on the uplink issue, because you mentioned the Ray-Bans again, I think it was Dean we had on, he made quite an interesting point about that. This idea that... which came out today on the earnings call again, that you wear these things and you're constantly sort of uploading what you're seeing to the cloud, let's say, and that requires a decent connection, and it's going to consume a lot of uplink traffic. But most of the problem is, most of the time you're just doing what we're doing here, and therefore it would just switch off and go into a sleep mode. It's only when you're in Oxford Street or something.
Sorry, I thought his point was the battery. It was never going to last.
He had two. Well, that's William who said about the battery. But I think Dean was like, most of the time, I mean, your day, 8 hours of my day is spent doing what Scott's doing now, and just staring at a screen. And
is it going to read everything you read?
For it. Well, would there be no need for it to be doing that? Because it could just be recorded by that and uploaded on the fixed line.
I just imagine something. So it sees everything you're saying when you're researching, and as you start typing your article, it would murmur in your ear like, hey, you might want to mention that thing about page
pointless
3.
Though, isn't it? Because it could just work with the laptop.
Yeah, I would be so fuck off. I mean,
for me, this thing?
The intrusiveness, I've got a little thing that irritates me. I've got these Pixel buds.
Oh, yeah.
And every now and then, it unilaterally turns down the volume and tells me I'm listening to it too loud. And I'm like, fuck off. I'll listen to it as loud as I want. By the way, even at max volume, it's not as loud as I want it to be. But this sort of nannying AI, I know what's best for you stuff does my head in.
Scott, I noticed you didn't quote this.
Yeah, exactly. It all gets a bit Howl from 2001, doesn't it?
A lot of people like this kind of thing, and they take advice from their AIs, and they make life choices based on what their AIs are telling them.
They're wrong.
Exactly. And
that's the end of it.
Like, big developments over the last 2 weeks have all been around OpenAI, Anthropic and others launching health-specific modes within GPT, so where you upload your health records and it will give you contextual advice, sometimes maybe superior to what a medical professional will give.
Ooh, careful.
It's pretty good with MRIs, apparently.
Yes, apparently. Obviously, you always need...
To paraphrase your countryman, careful now.
Exactly, yeah. But no, I think like...
Anyway, I did do a Irish accent.
That's quite a good one.
I'm a bishop, you little bollocks.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I'm a bishop, you little bollocks. This is all Father Ted stuff for people who
it's
don't
a good
know.
one. I'm impressed. But no, I think medicine is obviously an area where it will have a tremendously positive impact over the longer run.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, Microsoft always says it's going to cure all the disease in 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, all right, Microsoft.
Give us your money.
Does that mean we're all going to live forever? There's going to be a lot of people around, aren't there?
Well, longevity is one of the areas that is...
It will kill the atmosphere first, so... Yeah.
We'll live longer, but we'll live in a sort of desolate moonscape.
We'll all be on boats.
Yeah. Nature finds a way to kill us. Yeah.
Just one last thing, and then I'm going to move it on. That was a great, organic, spontaneous chat, and I feel like we could go on about it for
That's the whole
ages.
podcast. We finished.
In fact, we'll see. When are you going back to Ireland, Luke?
Going back tomorrow morning.
Oh, so we might lead you astray after if you're in the mood. What was I going to say? Oh, yes, just one last thing I wanted to mention from Richard Windsor and that number crunching he was doing. And so he went through all this stuff, and then he goes, OpenAI has to find a way to earn in excess of $20 per user per month just to stay ahead of the depreciation charge.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is like people actually need to be paying for this to pay Microsoft and Google and... Amazon, what they're investing in.
And these, these
and that's with
all these components, all these components, all these NVIDIA GPUs depreciate. So it's all very well, so it's not like, I don't know, like buying a house where your investment's likely to go up.
Yeah.
You build a fuck off data center for billions of dollars and it's depreciating. It's more analogous to buying a car, isn't it? And so he's saying that they need $20 per user per month just to stay ahead of depreciation before they even get into profit. So realistically, to be a going concern, it needs to be double that. And it's just hard now to imagine how OpenAI is going to get $40 off me especially when there are so many alternatives to it.
I think like the hyperscalers have been smart, as in they have kind of offloaded some of the kind of pressure on their balance sheets to the likes of these new neo clouds that have come up. So if you look at Nebius, actually really an interesting one that is, I believe, Dutch based but formerly part of Russian and Yandex. If you look at another one, the share price has exploded.
Is it?
CoreWeave, which Nvidia has invested in.
Nscale's one.
Yes.
We know those guys.
There's another few like Cypher. Some of these were like former kind of Bitcoin mining or crypto mining.
What is the next one, Luke?
Yeah.
So these are examples of businesses I think that would be probably the first dominoes to fall if there was any tightening of capital availability, and it means the hyperscalers are somewhat protected, but they are potentially in a difficult spot.
Which is why, of all of them, Google looks the most solid bet, and apparently Gemini, for people who compare these things, is really top notch.
So we use it, Ookla, throughout Ookla, we use it very heavily in our own workflow. Gemini enterprise subscription, I would say, it's very helpful.
Is that what you do? You just get up in the morning and say, Gemini, write this report for me, and then you go down the pub?
I wish it was as good. Not there yet.
I think Gemini is the only one I use because you can't avoid it. It's because everybody
I'm
uses
so
Google.
overexposed to Google, it pulls me.
Well, everybody's overexposed to Google, though.
No, but I've even got a Pixel phone and Pixel earbuds and everything.
But I have
get fucking Google miles.
It's unavoidable that if you're looking something up, who are the 20%, probably less than that, of people who are not using Google to get onto the internet to find something? And as soon as you type anything in nowadays, you're going to get something from Gemini popping up. So you're inadvertently using it. I mean, I always try and go to the links below
underneath.
And especially if it's something telecom.
Well, it's obviously been a nightmare for the SEO business model, search engine optimization.
It's like when someone gives you their personal email and it's not Gmail, you're like, oh.
And it regurgitates things in quite an odd way sometimes. It's like sort of mangling stuff from light reading occasionally, I've noticed. And
yes. No, well,
if it's something
definitely
quite
imprecise.
specific on something that you know that you've kind of written, but you just want to kind of get that story, and it's quicker to go through Google than it is through light reading search facility.
Well, that's the thing that I was saying to my son when we were chatting about it. I was like, by all means, use use AI as a tool, but I think you still have to stress test it. You still have to double check it. So to some extent, the degree to which it's going to enable a high degree of automation is still a little bit up in the air, because you've got to check its work. And it's not an excuse. I think I've said this before on the pod. If you fuck up and you just go, the AI made me do it, well, that's not going to save your ass, is it?
No, definitely not. And I suppose that's actually interesting area where like insurance companies now are doing a lot of kind of work around kind of risk models and premiums around like insuring against AI related hallucinations, for example. And how does that actually work from a risk perspective? Some of them don't want to move into that space. So a lot of really interesting stuff. The big challenge with the agentic models at present is that once you get towards like long contexts, multi-step reasoning, the probability or chances of hallucination at the moment rise exponentially, and that's the limiting factor for letting an agent run for maybe 5 hours to write a report versus letting it do like a 2-minute version. The number of hours creep up in the current RL format.
It's like ties it out.
Yes, exactly. Like a person, probably. A few beers in.
It can't cope.
That's what the CEO of Citadel,
Yes, he was at Davos.
He was like, I think the spending on data centers this year is going to top $500 billion. And he said, I think his example was like, we had some kind of analyst like run through a report or something, and the first few sentences were like amazing, and then everything below was crap.
Right.
But I mean, maybe he's shorting AI, so...
Well, obviously, everyone in this room has got a massive vested interest in these things not getting totally automated, because we're knowledge workers.
Exactly.
And, we count on, some of us got started a bit earlier, but we count on people paying us for our expertise and our unique take on things.
Yes, yeah.
And if people just start relying on AI for that, then there's no need for us. So there we are. But I think we're all right.
Where does AI get it from, though?
Exactly.
Well, yes. Well, we've had that before, haven't we? And if you get this total sort of self-eating snake type of thing.
You kind of choke itself.
Well, that's where it's going. That hence expressions like AI slop, I think.
Yes. You know? Well, that was the first thing I wrote this year was about AI slop. And again, I think we'll be all right as long as we're authentic and human about what we do.
And I would say, like, not to underestimate the improvement in reduction of the hallucination rate.
Yeah.
So if you look at the latest model from OpenAI, GPT 5.2, that sets the industry benchmark in terms of hallucination rate. Maybe not some other benchmarks, but hallucination rate, like really marked improvements over the last year.
Right.
So they are really, really improving. I still don't think it's the AGI is the likely endpoint, but
no,
I take your point that in what they do now, they're getting better and better.
Yeah.
The difference from 4 to 5 was very much less than 3 to 4 or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, you got these diminishing returns, definitely.
I think the AGI conversation's a bit of a weird one, really, because it never really sounded very realistic, but that doesn't mean that the tools themselves aren't like having a profound impact and won't result in job losses and this kind of thing, or change the way that we go about our lives. It doesn't have to be AGI to reach that point.
Exactly.
It's obviously not aware of what it's doing, and it's not sentient. And when it writes the word tree, it doesn't know what that means. It doesn't go and touch bark or smell smell the leaves in the summer as you would do. So its whole understanding of the world just isn't there. But it can still be something that's quite.
But they get better and better at mimicking that.
Well,
such that you get into that sort of Blade Runner-y thing.
No, but I don't even think that. I just think doing what they do, which is, as I say, a very efficient autocomplete on steroids, still has a profound impact on the nature of people's work.
Fair enough.
But they're not. They're clearly not what they're sometimes cracked up to be by the Sam Altman community, and they're no closer to AGI than they were when they started. Hence, I think I totally agree with the Demis Hassabis thing. It's like it's if you wanted to get to AGI, you have
another
to go about
endorsement, Demis.
You have to go about it a different way.
Yes.
Actually.
And Demis is like the most, I would say, conservative in projections. But even Demis is saying, 5-year period, we are getting towards very capable systems, whether or not it's LLMs or it's the world models or so forth. So I think even still people probably aren't grasping the pace of change that is coming.
Fair point.
Yeah.
Fair point. And, and old gits like me have to resist the temptation to stick our fingers in our ears and go, no, I'm not playing, because it's there. I mean, Ian and I had a friendly dispute over my framing of all this stuff as inevitable. I think we were talking about slightly different things, but we ended up meeting in the middle and saying, what's inevitable is that this technology.
Yeah.
What isn't inevitable? What is the degree to which we have to embrace it and make it ubiquitous in our lives. So well, look, I'm definitely going to move it on. Fun though. Did you have one last thing you wanted to say?
I suppose on that last point, I think for me a really interesting thing is if you look at kind of surveys that have been done globally, right, around perceptions of AI and what's to come, there's a huge divergence between kind of the West and the East. So you look at Asian countries, they actually take the cultures there have a very optimistic view that this is going to be an enhancement, going to make life better, so forth. In the West, it's actually the opposite. It's a very negative view.
Right.
Fear factor.
Bit more, as me and Ian represent.
So it's just interesting and notable to see that difference. And I think that probably pervades then how it's going to be adopted.
Well, this is a massive tangent, and I won't go down this rabbit hole too much, but maybe culturally, in the East, you tend to have more
trust.
And more kind of totalitarian leadership. So people are maybe trust's part of it, or the shitty way of putting it, from my perspective, is they're more used to just being told what to do by Big Brother.
Maybe.
So maybe the cultural jump is less for them.
Yeah, that's true. But I suppose the West, is kind of built on constant questioning of authority.
And freedom.
And freedom,
And the freedom to fuck up if you want to.
Yeah.
A freedom I've exploited as much as I can. Let me take this opportunity to once more thank the sponsors of this podcast, Cohere Technologies, which is the innovator behind the Universal Spectrum Multiplier software for 4G and 5G, and Pulsone technology for 5G and 6G coexistence, ISAC and NTN. Nice one. What one thing, knowing that your remit is being an analyst heading up the European side of things, I just thought, what good timing, because there's been tons of Europe-related news this week.
Yeah.
I'll just fire it as ever. I should have fired these up on Telecoms.com more. I mean, there's a more geopolitical one, which I wrote yesterday, where Mark Murtra, the Telefonica CEO, gave me an excuse to mainly just talk about politics rather than telecoms. Because, people will probably be aware that... we spoke about, in the first part of the year, I think we spoke about Greenland, and we mentioned it a bit last week as well, because John Strand wrote a piece that we published on Telecoms.com. But, yeah, he was just coming out of this stuff where he's just going, give me Greenland or I'm going to tariff your ass. And everyone's like, what the fuck? And, even like, I listened to quite a lot of American podcasts, even like American conservatives were like, Jesus Christ, Trump, wind your neck in.
Yeah.
Anyway, and that ended up being, at least for the time being, a bluff, because he's rode back on that after having a little bit of a chat. But what the tone it did set at Davos, which is this World Economic Forum thing where they all get together in Switzerland and sort of decide on the future of the world, or whatever moustache twirling oligarch shit they get up to there. The theme from it was led by the Canadian PM Mark Carney, but also Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU, and a few other people just came out with stuff that's basically going, look, it's just to paraphrase, if America's going to be a dick the whole time, then we've got to be less reliant on them.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not this is like 4D chess or something, where that's actually what Trump and his regime want, and by being
that
obnoxious,
argument increasingly ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I was going to put that forward.
4D chess plan.
It's hard to attribute too much strategic thinking to
the whole,
it. So
the whole sense of what he's done so far. My feeling is he's just completely incoherent. I think he goes and chats to someone and he decides, he makes his mind up about, apparently his whole justification for a couple of the bombings they've done in some countries is based on someone showing him some videos about persecution of Christians in those places. And then he'll get carried away.
Incredibly impulsive.
And it's like he'll go and meet Trump and sorry, not Trump, he'll go and meet Putin and it's like, oh, the Ukrainians are being completely unreasonable, and the next minute he's meeting Zelensky and it's like how awful the Russians are.
Well, I think you said it earlier. He's like, he thinks whatever the last conversation he had is. It's incredibly mercurial and ephemeral and volatile.
And that's why you see this coming over to Davos, and all of a sudden he's surrounded by a bunch of European leaders and NATO's general secretary or whatever saying, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he sounds quite meek and like, well, we're definitely not going to invade, And next week he'll be back in America chatting to Beardy, who's going to be telling him that he should be more aggressive. Yeah.
I think there is no going back from what happened in the last week. Geopolitically, I think that the line is in the sand. I think European trust, unfortunately,
it's been broken,
has been shattered, regardless of whether or not.
Yeah, he's done so much damage with that.
Yeah, so much damage, and I think that
I agree.
Europe is kind of in a holding pattern now, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a further deterioration at some point. So I think this ties very nicely into, I suppose, Europe now potentially going through a period of rearmament, I think will definitely be happening. And then obviously as well the whole focus on sovereignty running through the entire agenda.
And that was something that the Telefonica guy mentioned.
Well, there's also Ericsson, I think, was asked about sovereignty, wasn't he?
He had a slightly different take. This was the one where, by the way, we were talking about Swedish.
Well, he was more
earlier.
sympathetic towards America. There's a shocker.
Boy Ekholm has got the most brilliant Swedish accent. You can actually. This doesn't seem to be paywalled, along with most of Bloomberg, but there's a 5-minute video clip of him talking about, I think about their quarterlies. And anyway, and this is headed, Ericsson CEO, EU's tech sovereignty push is, quote, dangerous. Now, what he's saying from the bit of the interview that I listened to,
was that a televised interview that he gave with Bloomberg? I know it was written up in a couple of paragraphs, but they didn't say very much, so...
I don't know if Bloomberg has made all of the interview available, but there's definitely, I'm looking at it now, there's about 5 minutes of it that you can watch it. And he's got the most, as far as I'm concerned, quintessential Swedish accent. It's all very up and down.
He sounds like the chef on a certain TV program.
A certain chef that Swedes get really annoyed if you talk about him. But anyway, leaving aside his accent, I think what he's basically saying, and you're right, Ian, you're alluding to of course he's going to be pro-US because, as you've written many times, Ericsson's incredibly exposed to the US market.
It was a US entity, really.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if I'm going to look at it from his perspective, he's thinking he's probably going to have loads of conversations with regulators in Europe, and they're all very frustrated, companies operating in Europe, because of things that they've wanted to happen and they've never seen any progress.
And he's bitched about that Europe in that way before himself.
Well, I think even this week, I think we're going to talk about this at some point, but this whole DNA and the kind of new cybersecurity update where they've said in the 5G toolbox that was mandatory is going to be mandatory. It wasn't. It was a recommendation before, but he was asked about it on the earnings call today, and he's like, well, it's a proposal. It's 12 to 18 months. We're not banking on it. If it happened, it would be great because we still estimate his estimate for their market share, by the way, is much higher than other figures I've been given for what the Chinese, by Chinese vendors, I'm assuming he means pretty much all Huawei, because I don't think ZTE is very much at all. I mean, you probably know this better than I.
Very
but,
limited,
he was saying between a third and 40% with the figures he came out with today.
Of what?
Market share.
That Huawei's got in Europe?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I'd been given a figure by someone who I can't say, but they're kind of in the sort of analyst game of like a quarter, which is quite a bit lower than that. So,
right.
But anyway,
it depends on the country.
Yeah.
But that's still a surprisingly big chunk given the amount of effort there's been to get rid of them.
But Justin Hotard of Nokia has been sort of moaning about Europe's not done enough on this front.
Yeah.
And
another very self-interested.
Well, I think he's been quite clever about it, though, because what he said is we can't just say they need to get rid of Huawei, which, by the way, you're basically having a go at your own customers when you say things like that, because they like the fact that Huawei's there and they like its products and they like the competition.
Yeah.
So he said if we're going to do that, we need to sort of offer them some incentives and give them, like throw them a carrot when it comes to things like consolidation and some of the things that telcos have been pushing for ages. This whole idea of this single telecom market, and it's very hard to see how some of those things actually happen, I think. But Ekholm will have been, he's been boss for like almost 10 years now. The same frustrations. He wrote some blog describing Europe as a museum a couple of years ago. He said he was going to move the headquarters to America. He's got American citizenship. I think his wife and family's American. Okay. That's where they make all their money.
Yeah.
If you look at the skew in where they get their revenues from, it's 40% USA. And then the next biggest country on the list is like, I think we might be actually the UK or India's and it's down at 5 or 6%.
So and manufacturing and everything. Yeah.
So I can see why, if I'm looking at it from his perspective, you're running a business. Yeah. I get why you're like going to be worried about all of this stuff and sticking up for the idea of the US.
So leaving aside,
he's right, I think.
Leaving aside the clear professional self-interest of it, he also makes a good point, which is just a sort of reality check. I was loving all this bombastic shit coming out of Davos. Mark Carney's speech was the most surprising because he's just this dull technocrat. He used to be the governor of the Bank of England. And he came out with some stuff that really laying some.
Yeah, but he's had a neighbour telling him that he wants to take over his country for the last few weeks.
But he could still be passive about it. And the point is, he isn't.
The Canadians have decided they're not going to be passive about that. I think is the feedback.
Could be. Well, he won his election because he wasn't going to win until Trump started saying 51st state.
So he's there on a. He's like his whole mandate is to go and like moan about Trump.
Totally.
So. Now he's not welcome on the Board of Peace.
Oh.
Next to all those lovely people from the world on the Board of Peace.
My brother shared a little AI generated thing of the Board of Peace, and it had all the biggest baddies in the world through literature, like Darth Vader and Sauron and Lex Luthor, and all these baddies were on the Board of Peace. But I think the point that Ekholm's making is, it's all very well saying "fuck America," Trump's a nutter. We don't want any part of it. But then he's going, okay, so what are you going to actually do?
Yeah,
because one of the things that, let's call it globalization, has done is, it's basically an exaggeration of the comparative advantage economic thing, where one country's good at making this thing, another country's good at making that thing. Both of them don't need to make both. Yeah. They can just focus on their core competence and then trade with each other, and that's the essence of trade.
Yeah.
And globalization has taken that to another level with Labour and all that sort of thing, which is actually, to be fair to Trump, the whole MAGA thing was about re-onshoring blue-collar jobs and that sort of thing, which I don't think he's done, but that's still his rhetoric.
I don't think those jobs exist anymore, the ones he wants to get back. I mean,
well, quite. And
they've been automated away.
And who says people want them? It's like, yeah, people want to go back down coal mines.
Well, they never wanted to make shoes for Nike. They wanted to buy shoes for Nike,
well, quite.
but they didn't want to make them.
So we're now globally very integrated, and we do, as we were just going on about Google and all that sort of thing, we are very reliant on a lot of American companies and services. And Eccom's just saying, and this was actually echoed when I chatted to Per Narvinger, the head of their networks this morning, he's just saying, look, let's just have a little think.
Yeah.
And let's not self-harm, I think is what you're saying. What were you about to say, mate?
You gave the example of comparative advantage. I think there's no better example, I think, in a European context than Ireland. So I would say the Irish economy is probably the most closely integrated in the world outside of Canada with the US.
Yes, totally.
So, obviously it is...
all those HQs in Dublin.
All the HQs,
stuff.
all the global tech companies, and Ireland has gone from mud flats to this incredibly prosperous country in a very short space of time, and all of that,
thanks, a lot of it is to that.
All to the American,
is it?
The prosperity of the US.
Yeah.
It's certainly not due to the ingenuity of the, present or recent Irish political system. It is that historic, focus on a low corporation tax rate, attracting in Americans, and that has been hugely beneficial. And for a country like Ireland, moving towards that kind of more multipolar world, breakdown and integration, the costs are absolutely enormous on the negative side.
Yes, well, Ireland must be shitting itself with all this talk.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's an example of whereby, obviously there's a whole part of the political class in Ireland that I would say are anti-American, but I think they don't grasp what that means in practical terms, in terms of...
Well, all of Europe has got an anti-American bit to it. Some of it's cultural, they can seem a little bit boorish and crude, and some of it is just post-colonial resentment, Britain used to be the world superpower 200 years ago, and it very much isn't now. But I think most people, they might indulge in a bit of anti-American rhetoric, but they're perfectly happy to do business with them and take their money.
Of course, exactly, yeah.
And that's on the flip side from all these American pods I listen to. America's got this real sense of entitlement, and they think Europe is a bunch of lazy freeloaders who just sit around in pavement cafes doing fuck all while they're doing all the work. And I think Trump... it was in the news today, he's outraged a bunch of people by implying that in Afghanistan the other NATO countries didn't really do any proper fighting, so everyone's shat the bed about that.
Right, yeah.
Well, quite rightly so as well.
Now,
I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm just saying that's representative of this American view that they think that Europe's a sort of bit of a freeloader and not pulling its weight and that sort of thing. I'm not saying I agree with it.
And I think there's elements of truth, 100%. I think I wouldn't discount all of the American criticism. I think if you look at, European Union and the Commission structure, there is definitely flaws there in terms of the centralisation of...
You're preaching to the converted with me, mate.
No, exactly. There's flaws there. Competitiveness is a big focus. Lack thereof. You look at countries like Germany, obviously a suicidal energy policy, closing down nuclear. Their biggest competitive advantage in a European context was having cheap gas imports from Nord Stream with Russia.
Doesn't help when the Yanks keep blowing their pipelines up though, does it? Allegedly. But who's going to sue me? The whole of America. An
example of policy decisions that did shoot themselves in the foot, and I think the Americans are very much right on that, to highlight that. Obviously there are other countries where like take Denmark, that have been run incredibly well. They have no natural resource strength, but still they've had prudent fiscal management. They've done very well.
John Strand will be happy.
But it's still not a setup that the Americans would like, is it? It's a high tax country where it's a completely different model from the US model. And you look at debt. I mean, what the US loses with its approach is. A lot of US cities are not in very good shape. There's this huge wealth gap. There's a huge homeless problem in a lot of
their social safety net is lower than in Europe.
It's a bit of a mess. Like I push back on some of this idea that Europe's a disaster area and it's all about crime and immigration. Like I feel less safe when I go to America than I do in most of Europe. And You get to someone like Denmark, which is obviously like looking at maybe the best example of what Europe can do.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen a homeless person in Denmark.
Well, Copenhagen's pretty bloody utopian, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think Europe's kind of damned if it. It's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yes,
it's like you were complaining about the European Union, but the problem today is that if we're not going to be a global economy anymore and we're going to go back to like big regions, we don't have the economies of scale to compete against a China or a US.
100%.
So
unless we're much more integrated than we are.
Yeah, but the problem with being integrated is that people like you and like lots of other Europeans would go, we don't want to be integrated, and therefore it's like, well, what's the solution? There isn't one then.
And I think that like touches really well on the DNA. Digital Networks Act, like the big kind of contention with that really has been, that kind of sovereignty at the nation state level versus at a European level.
Yes, exactly. And that's why they keep having to water these things down, don't they?
Exactly. And there's arguments that are, I think, very reasonable for both sides. I think you can't take a one-size-fits-all. There are huge benefits to further integration, as we discuss, as well as that, sometimes the Brussels approach can be quite blunt, and I would make that case around spectrum, and I know we might come to that in a few moments, but it's interesting, that kind of push and pull.
Well, I will invite you.
We should come to that, because otherwise we're going to run out of time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was about to do that. I was going to invite you, Luke. You presumably looked at this Digital Networks Act this week. Can you just cue it up just by giving us the sort of your top line summary of what it aimed to do, what it did, that sort of thing?
Okay, so I suppose I'd say that obviously it's the most impactful, or potentially most impactful piece of regulation from Brussels in the telecom space, in well over a decade. I think people forget, but the DNA and the whole concept of Digital Networks Act.
Can you have a beer, are you okay?
All good for the moment, thank you.
Sorry.
Originated from Thierry Breton. He actually wrote a LinkedIn piece where for the first time he introduced this idea of DNA, or Digital Networks Act, and that has
he was a very
through.
consequential person.
Yes.
I often hated the stuff he came out with.
Yes, not all good,
but he certainly made an impact.
Certainly,
not least with his haircut.
He made an impact, yes, and I know he ruffled feathers for different reasons. But anyway, so the DNA itself, I suppose, is this kind of headline proposal to increase the competitiveness of European telecoms on the premise that the reason it has underperformed the US and China is the subscale. So you have, dozens and dozens of champion national operators versus obviously 2 or 3 large ones. So the biggest change is really that the DNA proposes, and this is different, I suppose, from the European Electronics Communications Code, where that had to be transposed by each member state. The DNA is a regulation, so it's much more like it's a blanket implementation once it goes through all the different layers of scrutiny and so forth. But the kind of key proposals in the DNA, the first one, I suppose, I think that maybe hasn't got enough attention, is this kind of centralisation of control on satellite authorisation.
Was that passport thing?
So that's related. That's
okay,
different.
sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on.
No. So there's the satellite one, which is previously, if you were SpaceX, you had to go to Ireland, Malta, Luxembourg,
get
everywhere.
Get
sign off. Cost burden. Okay for large entities like Amazon that could navigate that, have the resources legally, but for, say, European smaller companies, it was seen as kind of a...
And that's an interesting thing. I'll just quickly butt in with a tangent. A lot of people don't understand why big companies are actually in favour of regulation.
Yes.
And the reason they're in favour of regulation isn't because they like the regulation, it's because they've got these massive compliance departments.
Yes.
And they've got the ability to absorb the cost and complexity and hassle.
Yes.
Whereas SMEs, it's
don't.
fucking crippling.
Well, like the whole AI, let's regulate AI, which Sam Altman sounded really in favour of. And it's like, why is he in favour of that? It's like, because none of your competitors
I think it sort of creates
Microsoft behind them. So.
A phrase they use sometimes when they're talking about business strategy is a moat.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it applies to this one, but it just basically creates a sort of defensive barrier around your business that's hard for competitors to overcome.
Exactly. And now, so what this is really geopolitical at this point. So throughout the entire DNA, there's repeated reference to sovereignty, digital autonomy. So the idea here is that centralization of control over satellite authorization means that potentially in the future it could be used as a tool to block access to a hostile constellation or something like that. That's almost the implication. It's all about accelerating Europe's own sovereign constellation IRIS², which is, I suppose, seen as a competitor to the Chinese and US alternatives. So that's one side, satellite, okay? The other big one, I suppose, that the GSMA are very happy about, and operators to some extent, is spectrum licenses. So moving from 20-year licenses to indefinite or 40-year licenses.
Right. Which is more like it is in the US, isn't it?
Exactly. More like the US. And some European countries, so Serbia was one of the last to move on a 5G auction recently. They went down the 40-year route. So the idea is that you improve the economics, you provide predictability. The contrarian view is that you entrench incumbents unless you have a muscular kind of methodology for wondering or for examining whether or not the spectrum has been efficiently used. You have bad outcomes. So there's a lot of work to take place around, okay, how can the Commission know if 3 or Vodafone is actually using the spectrum to the best of its ability in every area?
I think I get the argument about entrenching incumbents, but it's a market where the barriers to entry are so high anyway that you're never going to have that people coming in and out opening a barbershop across the road, are you?
Which is why it has to be so regulated.
Yeah. And the other side is that the ability of the Commission to basically review, scrutinise and veto national spectrum auctions. Here's where you're getting into dangerous territory. The sovereign people would say, so Ireland, you take Spain is running or Ireland is running their own auction. The Commission will review it. The Commission can intervene to recommend changes, or if they're not happy with it, for whatever reason. This is seen by the Commission as like kind of harmonising things, making sure auctions follow a standardised process. But also, interestingly, there's a point around if a hostile firm gained access to spectrum, the Commission could intervene to revoke that access. So say a non-European, for whatever reason is deemed hostile, that they could actually intervene there.
China, cough.
And for sovereignty reasons, that their rationale is sovereignty.
Technology. I guess the closest to that's Hutchison at the moment.
Yes, which Hong Kong...
but they seem to be selling off most of their interests anyway.
Only in the last week, there's news in Ireland, actually, that...
that's right.
The chat we had on last week, I think, broke the story, didn't it?
Yes, Kieran, yes. Yeah. It's a Liberty are looking to...
Fair play to him. Yeah, I was talking about Irish accents. Of course, I've practiced it loads because my sister-in-law's Irish. And,
so you were misleading us when you said you.
Well, no, it's just accent. I've never.
You actually really enjoy doing it. Clearly.
Oh, well, I love the accent. But I've got relatives from Ireland. I've spent time over there. Obviously, I love Father Ted, all that sort of thing. And obviously, one of the fun things about the British Isles is, they're separate countries, but there's so much closer relationship between England and Ireland. I know historically it's been a bit one-sided, but culturally there's just massive overlap in a way that, I don't know, maybe an equivalent would be Spain and Portugal or something, I don't know. But
pre the current events, but
right. Oh, is there something kicking off?
Well, there's Trump and...
Oh, you were just talking about what we were talking about. Oh, sorry, I thought there was a special little bit of argy-bargy that I wasn't familiar with. Anyway, ignore that tangent. You mentioned GSMA. Our take on it, my colleague Armita wrote up our DNA story. We went with the headline, GSMA unhappy with the new Digital Networks Act. So because they had a bit of a bitch about a bunch of stuff. I mean... There's a little quote before you join in. They go, they said this is not simplification; it's complexification. So they were looking for obviously regulatory simplification. They were looking for less regulators. It's always been the case. Boy Outcome said this. They just want
complication.
Yes, well, complexification. I know.
I don't know that word.
Yeah, well, there we are. Now you do.
Thanks,
so that was part of their moan, but you were about to characterise their response.
There's validity to that. Absolutely, there are areas in this DNA where it almost is kind of potentially multiplying complexity. The GSMA obviously are unhappy in particular around, and the operators around the fair share abandonment.
So I didn't even know that. They've completely just said they're not moving ahead with this anymore.
So there's no legal framework.
Right.
This is kind of based on obviously not wanting to make unhappy the US side, given the trade deal that happened in Scotland last year. But there is provisions there for future
Right.
Exploration. So the hyperscalers are not happy either. They're happy, but they're
so it's a fudge.
That could be,
it's like a middle ground.
Yeah.
Here's the quote from the GSMA addressing that. They said the DNA introduces an unclear voluntary conciliation and facilitation mechanism. They like their long words. Don't they, GSMA?
No one's going to do anything voluntarily.
Exactly.
Well, for network operators and large traffic generators, this falls far short of addressing significant and persistent.
What's that? Me? Is it?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
What's that? What's that? A fucking car? This falls far short of addressing significant and persistent bargaining power asymmetries. So they love their corporate speak there, but obviously all that means we wanted to get some cash off big tech, and we're not going to be able to. And it is an interesting thing because obviously, this being the EU, they will be mulling this thing over for years.
Yeah.
Nothing happens overnight in the EU, does it?
No, it's delayed already. The DNA has been delayed several times.
Because we had member states going, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
And then when that is fine, we have another lunch. Or I should perhaps done a German accent. I don't think I've ever tried that one. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll end up sounding like a war
I don't think they are having lunches. I think that's the problem. Like, I think Trump's having long lunches and just saying, let's do something anyway at the lunches, whereas the EU and the EC, they're working hard, but it's because they're working too hard. No, it's because there's so many people involved. There's so many processes to go to.
Yeah.
I don't think it's because they're sitting there having glasses of wine and cheese.
No, that's just the diss that I choose to indulge in.
It's just that there's too many people involved in the process.
Too many moving parts.
Yeah.
And there's, so to achieve consensus is very difficult. I mean, I think that, while not being a fan of the EU in its current form, I mean, it does seem clear, going all the way back to the Davos stuff we're talking about, that I think Europe's got to sort of shit or get off the pot. I think it's either got to go for a much bigger political union or call the whole thing off. I mean, they won't call the whole thing off, obviously, but I don't see how if they expect to be a bloc that competes with the US and China, they've got to be a lot more politically unified, I think. And obviously, 100%. As you were just saying, member states are going to push back on that.
100%. And I suppose the interesting area as well, I would say, in the DNA is this area of kind of the link between telecoms policy and kind of defence. And where that comes into play is around interference, for example, with spectrum. So there are new kind of proposals there to basically beef up the ability of the Commission to help individual countries that are facing problems with interference. So prime example is along the eastern borders of Europe, whereby obviously the Russians have...
there was up to no good.
Up to no good in the context of interference of GPS, which has a really big impact on the battlefield.
Yeah. Right. So you can see why they would.
And with satellite and things like that. So this is an example where the Commission is saying, well, look, if a member state is having this problem, we can actually bring this all the way up to the level of the Commission and potentially use trade policy as a coercion tool. So this is you're seeing the blurring of lines between telecoms policy and defence and industrial policy on a massive scale. Through the DNA is how I would posit it.
And talking about more the security side, this gives me a good segue into one other bit of news coming out of Europe this week, and gives me an opportunity to throw the ball to you, Ian. You wrote a piece where the headline was, Europe is having another go at banning Huawei. Good luck.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Well, that was the thing that came out the day before the DNA, which is the latest cybersecurity stuff, which, I mean, it's a lot bigger than telecom. It's like about sort of dealing with the way that Europe the way that Europe approaches kind of vendors that it would deem to be high risk in multiple sectors that would serve critical infrastructure. And it's all quite hazy at the moment anyway. They've not even drawn up like lists of who their high risk vendors are, what countries of concern it might be coming from.
I did a Control F on the massive document that came with it, and looking for Huawei and China, and they never mention any specifics.
But at least in, I mean, the bit that's the most advanced, because I think it's taken from this, is the 5G area, the telecom area, because they've had this what they call the 5G toolbox for years, which was, I think it's about 5 or 6 years old, and the whole point of that was a recommendation that countries don't use Huawei or ZTE.
And as we were just saying earlier about voluntary stuff,
those were the high risk vendors that you don't, like, you can't name them like Voldemort or something, but those are the companies you can't use in your 5G networks. But I mean, they came out and said it. Henna Virkkunen, who's the latest, she's got a weird job title. She's the commissioner.
All their senior commissioners have got really annoying job titles.
But they've changed them all the time. Hers has got sovereignty in it, her job title now. So tech sovereignty.
Oh, look, I've got it here in the story I wrote. Executive Vice President for Tech Sovereignty, Security and Democracy.
That's it. Yeah, I don't know what democracy's got to do with it, but
weirdly broad.
But she herself sort of said, like, we've had the 5G toolbox in place for 5 or 6 years, and basically no one's done anything.
Fucking used it.
That's not quite what she said, because people have moved with it, and some countries have implemented it, and some have part implemented it. But I think John Strand's quite good on this. On the sort of whatever you think about his opinion, his data's good on who's kind of being where and Huawei and ZTE are being used in networks. And I got some stuff from him from end 24, and there's only six countries in the whole of the EU that have completely sort of Huawei ZTE free networks. The biggest of which is Denmark, which is not a very big country.
Yeah,
like the Baltic states aren't, and like Malta's not, and so it's like there's this kind
of. We're getting there, aren't we?
Well, we're not in the EU, by the way, mate.
Oh yeah, good point. Oh yeah,
but
for which I'm partly responsible.
But yeah, we are. We're N27. We're supposed to be like no Huawei in the 5G network, and they seem to be on course. But so what they've done now is propose that the 5G toolbox becomes mandatory. I think some of the journalists were saying, well, what if people carry on ignoring you? This is a problem with whether the EU, the EC has enough kind of power to push things through, because it's like, well, they'll lose access to funding for telecom projects, and they might not be able to participate in some standardization processes. And I can still sense this being really problematic. Is like Germany going to be swayed by that when it's got 90 billion euros worth of exports going to China every year?
And does the German taxpayer want to foot the bill for ripping out infrastructure? Is the other question.
The other question, because some of the figures were quite high, like how much it would cost to take out all the Chinese equipment over the whole of Europe. I think there was an article in one of the Spanish newspapers putting it at like 20 billion euros. But Ericsson's, this came up today on the earnings call with Ericsson, obviously, because they were going to get asked, what do you think about the latest ruling, which Justin Hotard of Nokia is going to get asked about next week, and he was probably the most vocal in terms of the EU's not done enough to sort of clear out high risk vendors, and we don't have access to China, by the way, and isn't it time they did something? I think a lot of his lobbying has probably kind of spurred some of this to happen. But Boy Ekholm was like, I mean, I'm kind of glad I wrote the headline he did, because he went, it's a proposal, it's 12 to 18 months. We're not banking on it, basically. It'd be great upside for us.
I completely missed the 3-year deadline thing when I wrote it up.
So when it comes into force,
where that was.
It's 3 years.
Oh, when it comes into force.
But it's a proposal at the moment. There'll be discussions that go on, and then it's 3 years. I mean, 5G will have moved to 6G by the time any of this actually becomes implemented anyway. So this is where I agree with you. Yeah, there's this kind of talking shop aspect to the EU that trying to get anything done is quite hard.
I think now, though, the distinction is that, like, post Davos this week, I think like there's a real recognition now that you have to get Europe has to get its act together. I think that the geopolitical
I'll believe it when I see it
is acting as it's going to act as a forcing function. I think, and this is, I know we discussed it. I think like Europe is in an incredibly lucky position, I think, from a telecoms perspective, that it has 2 world-class vendors on its doorstep. That can't be said about many trading
No, it can't. Globally. But the other thing, I think I wrote this in my story, is I don't think the developments of the last few days will have necessarily
moved the needle.
Will have necessarily made a lot of European countries think we should be getting rid of Huawei and ZTE. I mean, what's happened in Canada is really interesting recently, with Mark Carney trying to re-establish a trade deal with Canada. They're a Five Eyes country that moved to ban Chinese vendors in 2022, and now he's like talking about getting electronic vehicles and stuff. A lot of apparently I've heard from someone who was saying that some of the big European telcos have been going to Brussels and saying, given what's going on in the world, is it right for us to be banning Huawei?
Actually, what's happened was
those companies.
It's like we used to be monogamous with the States, and then they treated us badly, so now we're sleeping around a bit.
But there will be, obviously the Chinese side will obviously, and they've already stated as much, that like they've warned that there'll be retribution for any decisions made.
Well, and that's the funny thing, going full circle back to the stuff that happened in Davos. This is where I think Trump is fucking up in a strategic way, leaving aside his unique idiosyncrasies. I think I was chatting to a mate and I was going that the kindest possible interpretation you could put on some of this Greenland stuff is that Trump likes to probe for red lines. And so he'll throw shit out there and he'll wait and see where your line in the sand is. And then he's like, okay, well, that's their line in the sand. And that's where he doesn't mind looking like he...
Oh, their line in the sand is they don't want to be invaded. That I would never have thought that would be a line in the sand.
Actually, I think the invasion part is a little bit of a distraction. I think that the tariff one was the much more substantial, aggressive thing. The invasion part, he's just been sort of toying with journalists. He didn't rule it out, but that could have just been him trolling and fucking around. Anyway, the point is...
Well, that's an example of your line in the sand, though, surely. So throughout the
but I think the line in the sand that was drawn was provoked more by the tariffs than by vague talk of invasion. I don't think anyone, I certainly didn't, I don't think many people took that very seriously. But what they did take very seriously was this use of very coercive, very domineering tactics to try and force a sale against the apparent will of the Greenlanders as well, it must be said. But so that's the kindest way, and I don't necessarily think this is true. So this is like steel manning his position. It could be that he's just an impulsive nutter, as we were saying. But as you were saying before, Luke, there's a kind of point of no return. Yeah. And now that he's done that, and now that he's acted in such bad faith, it's like, we'll climb down from it. We'll reach some kind of agreement. But from now on, Europe's like, Jesus Christ, why do we have to accommodate the Yanks when at a moment's notice they'll stab us in the back? And so they might start flirting with China a lot more or whoever.
Yeah, and I think, I suppose, look, there's risks there as well. I think, Europe shouldn't be under any illusion.
It's not like China's such a unequivocally brilliant partner.
Like culturally, we're far more aligned with the Americans, you know. So, I would hesitate.
But the Americans seem to be politically trying to model themselves on the Chinese at the moment. Like, we quite like the look of this country. We'll have it.
I think...
Well, China's not very imperialist at all, though.
Well, I'm not sure I'd agree with that. I mean, they claim Taiwan as their own.
But it was. To be fair to them. I'm not saying they should have it. I'm all for an independent Taiwan, but it was part of China.
Right, okay, but that's probably the sort of argument that someone like Trump would throw out. There's this novel concept where you ask the people in a particular area what they'd like to do.
Yeah, no. Obviously, I don't approve of what he's done about Greenland. I'm just saying on the whole,
the wicked Muslims.
But Tibet, well, but that's not imperialism. I'm being a little bit
Tibet's
pedantic.
Definitely imperialism.
Well, it's part of China, though.
Yeah,
it's not Nepal.
It's part of China now, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just don't think they've been very expansionist compared to, let's say, for example, Europe over the years. They haven't been very imperialistic. Whereas America, I'm just slightly querying you're saying that America's becoming more like China, because I think it's becoming, yes, in some ways, in terms of it being very over... muscular and over assertive.
Yeah.
But it seems to be more expansionist than I think China is, at least in a classic colonial way, as opposed to China's got the Belt and Road and it's got economic expansionism, but not old school imperialism.
Well, China's
flag in that country.
Yeah.
China's ambitions regarding Taiwan are like expansionism, where a democratic nation doesn't want to be a part of China.
Yeah, but the Chinese people would argue,
and I would say if someone's like,
it's always been part of China. Is their assertion?
Well, yeah, but that's ridiculous, isn't it? Well,
I think until after the.
I mean, you can ask the Irish person in the room; he might have an opinion about that sort of argument.
Yes. What do you think about countries shitting on smaller countries?
It's always been part of us. It's always been part of the British Isles.
Trump said, Greenland, they just had a boat land there. I'm like, what do you think America is?
No, I mean, I don't want to get too distracted by it. It was just a minor little pedantic point of mine that I don't want to labour. So the thing, just to finish off on this cybersecurity thing and how it may or may not affect Huawei. Huawei came out with a statement about it, didn't they?
Yeah, they didn't say very much. It's just the usual.
No, well, that's the usual Huawei way. Not bad when I've had a few beers and a whiskey. My headline was EU tiptoes around a Huawei ban with the new cybersecurity package, and obviously it didn't explicitly mention Huawei or even China in any of it. But I said, nonetheless, Huawei seems to be in little doubt, and it offered a statement saying a legislative. Well, I won't read it all, but it's basically saying you can't just go around banning motherfuckers with no evidence. Is basically what they're saying, which has always been there.
It was interesting.
Position.
One of the questions asked during the press conference of Henna Verkunen was that would the countries of concern and high risk vendors possibly include American companies? given what's been going on in the last few days. And she didn't say yes or no. She just sort of went, well,
suddenly the ambiguity that's built into high-risk countries takes on extra utility, doesn't it?
Makes sense. But I suppose that, is there many, from a RAM vendor perspective, unless you consider Ericsson to be quasi US.
I'll still call him Swedish for now.
Yeah, it's still, it's
Ericsson
either
still
European
sounds
or
Swedish.
Chinese,
He doesn't sound like John Wayne, does he?
No, but Nokia's boss does.
Yes, funnily enough.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean that's going to be interesting. I think, these things have all happened kind of independently of each other, but my gut feel is that Europe's going to be even more hesitant to antagonise China as a result of everything that's happened at the start of this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's kind of sad that Europe...
pincer movement.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of sad that Europe's kind of choosing between blocks to suck up to. It's a bit undignified, isn't it?
Yeah.
For the continent that used to run the world. But then again, there are many reasons why Europe is relatively diminished. But I think Europe has more than ever, it's got to balance that. And yes, it's going to piss off the Yanks sometimes, it's going to piss off the Chinese sometimes. But I don't think it can afford to pick a team. I mean, there have been a few people, I can't remember, there have been a few people kind of indicating that Europe's got to pick a team. I think certainly America is kind of pushing it in that way.
Yeah.
But I think, if Trump couldn't have done more to highlight the dangers of picking Team America.
Yeah.
Because it's not a totally reliable sort of ally.
Well, I think if you look at it strategically, I think the US position, whether you agree with it or not, I think it's correct. The US position and their perspective is that Europe is financing their primary adversary through trade, and that's like the entire approach through which the administration looks at Europe. Whether you agree with it or not, I think that's the way that they do look at Europe. And that colours the perspective. But that's why you're seeing, such a big push on the likes of the Mercosur trade deal.
Yeah.
South American.
No, and von der Leyen made a really big song and dance about that this week, didn't she?
And India as well, looking at free trade agreements. So there's this diversification of markets ongoing. But I mean, people have to be realistic. You talk about Canada going over to China. I mean, China is never going to be a primary and large importer of Canadian goods. They're so dependent on the US, and the US is their best partner. And not to lose sight of that as well.
Yeah,
I was just doing a quick bit of Googling on the biggest US trade partners.
Mexico and Canada, let me guess.
Yeah, they're right up there. But European Union,
it's your neighbours.
European Union's right up there. If you take it as a block. But then once you get into countries, Mexico first, Canada second, and the balance is this is what Trump was originally banging on about with his tariffs, which I think most people thought it was quite economically incoherent, saying that that any kind of trade imbalance implies some kind of unfairness that needs to be rectified by tariffs, which seemed bollocks to me, but I'm not an economist, so I won't be too strident about it. But yeah, Mexico and America runs massive trade deficits with loads of countries, and the real reason, my limited knowledge of economics, is that America's got about the highest standard, one of the highest standards of living in the world. And so it has to import loads of stuff, and one of the reasons it can afford to import loads of stuff is because it's got the global currency. Yeah, exactly.
The reserve currency.
But anyway, so Mexico first, Canada second, China third. So it's all, and that's the reason I looked it up. They got a nerve going, anytime you trade with China, you're helping out our enemy, when it's their third biggest fucking trade partner.
Yeah.
So shut up.
Well, I suppose they're trying to reduce that as well. Obviously,
Well, they're trying to reduce it, but
they're not buying any Huawei and ZTE stuff.
The problem is that American consumers like
cheap goods,
like their goods, and China's still the manufacturing centre of the world.
Those Lenovo laptops and
Temu.
And increasingly, like I think when we chatted about it in the first part of the year, we're talking about robots. China's kicking ass on robots, kicking ass on autonomous cars and all that rare earth.
Yeah.
Which apparently America, as soon as it gets hold of Greenland, is going to suddenly go drilling in the fucking Arctic. I can't see that.
Well, that's the.
There's a stock.
Reason,
just get into fur coats. That's That's a growth stock.
Canada Goose.
Yeah.
But I suppose the example there on, like, okay, Europe being pushed by two sides. If you look at, so obviously the Biden administration moved on this, then the Trump administration around the de minimis ruling for small packages. So from the likes of Temu or Shein.
That's right,
where they brought in a tax. And now Europe has done the same, or is doing the same from the Commission level, because of this fear of, an explosion in inward importation because of the excess supply that was going to the US being rerouted into Europe. And that's an example of whereby we're trying to mitigate against something on the Chinese side, but then the Chinese are unhappy and then they
understandably.
I'm seeing more and more Chinese cars now here.
Yes.
Jaiku and Omodo, which are the same brand.
BYD is a big one.
Yes.
BYD, but
Our taxi in Dublin was BYD.
Was it? Yeah, because in Ireland actually the taxi grant is like 30 or 40k for EV.
And I was fucking sorry for butting in. I was fucking around with some of the fittings while we were driving.
Yeah.
And one of them I didn't realise was the door, and I opened the door while we were driving along because I thought it was like a window control or something.
It lets you.
Yeah, that's a good point. It did.
BRD.
That's stupid that it would let you do that. If it's a button,
especially as it's Chinese.
It's very nice. It's very nice of the taxi driver not to chuck me out of the car for doing that. Listen, we're running out of time, and we want to talk about Ericsson's quarterlies. I thought I'd crack one last one open.
Okay.
I know.
Can we have a little break?
Well,
it's only
do you think you can hold on for like
5.
20 minutes?
No, it's more like 10. But actually,
More like 10. 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Go on, let's power through, and then we'll sprint to the bog after. Or have you got to go now?
No, it's just like, okay, go on.
Because we're nearly out of time, mate.
Yes.
Pierre's going to start giving me looks. Ericsson.
he's going to be very brief in his answer.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, yeah, they made some money, whatever. So quarterlies came out today. You and I were both on Teams bemoaning the fact that we were feeling a little bit jaded from going out last night, and then we had to actually do some work and write up their quarterlies.
Yeah.
But we did. So, Ian, why don't I chuck it to you? What was your top line take on their quarterlies?
I mean, it's the same as the recent few quarters. There's not any big surprises. Like sometimes you listen to those quarterlies and there's like some like traumatic update, and this wasn't one of them. I don't think it was like more of a continuation of what they talked about late last year. So like flat market in 5G. I mean, it's not declining anymore. It's like gone down a lot in 2023 and 2024 according to Omdia's numbers, and it's kind of bottomed out, but no one's like expecting growth. He keeps using the word flattish now to talk about their revenue outlook, Boy Ecom, and so they're pretty much focused on cost cutting to sort of boost margins.
Indeed, which they seem to have done well. I mean, that was my take on it. Revenues single figure percentage growth, which I suppose in itself is some minor achievement.
Well, it's down 5%, I think, but it's up in organic terms.
Yeah, adjusted 2%. For adjustments, as I say.
Well, it's just currency movements, really, unless you bought something. Exactly. But the sort of operating margin, they've got these long-term targets that they announced a few years ago to have like an operating margin of between 15 and 18%. And I think if you take out like the divestment of this iConnective business that they span off, they're at about 14.9% at the moment. But like investors obviously pay attention to that stuff, and it's like I don't like coming up with new targets, so they're still trying to push themselves up towards the top end of that. I think they cut 5,000 jobs last year. They've cut about 17,000 in the last 3. They've talked about another 1,600 cuts in Sweden in the last week, and they've talked about other cuts where they haven't actually specified the number, but globally they're kind of cutting more jobs, basically, which is not... It'd be a surprise if they'd said, we're not going to carry on cutting, to be honest with you. But it's intriguing that they can cut so much and still like maintain a business of the same relative size.
Yeah, I thought an interesting thing from the numbers...
Well, yeah.
From some of the numbers for the full year 2025, I do screenshots from their presentation and whack them into my stories. And so they've cut a lot of overheads. I can't remember what it stands for. SG&A expenses. I think it's just general.
SG&A is everything that isn't R&D, basically.
There we go. Okay, so, which is exactly it. So their SG&A expenses went down a lot.
Yeah,
but their R&D not. Only a little. Oh, so that's what they're always keen to stress.
The R&D went down by 10%. R&D
not for the full year.
Yes, it did. R&D went down by 9 or 10%. It went down from 53.5 billion in 2024 to about 48 point something billion last year.
Okay, well the table I put in says 51.4 for 24 and 48.5 for for 25.
Well, when you adjust from
anyway, whatever.
I mean, you've got adjusted,
but it went down.
I think that's adjusted for that isn't adjusted for in adjustments.
Fair enough.
Reported numbers went down from 53.5 to about 48, so they went down by 9%.
Fair
now
enough.
some of that's so some of that's foreign currency, but they have made cuts in R&D.
Yeah, which is always rings alarm bells, doesn't it?
Well, so the interesting thing is they'd never cut R&D.
Yeah.
They haven't cut on R&D under Boyer Echo. Boyer, if you look at what spending on R&D's like gone up by under him, it's dramatic. They were on about like 3.5 billion.
Yeah, because they were having a mayor.
3.5 billion they were
Vestberg.
spending under Vestberg in 2016, and in 2024 it was 5.9 billion. That's a dramatic increase in your R&D spending.
Doubling,
And then last year it came down to about, if you like converting into dollars, it came down to about $5.4 billion. So some of this is foreign exchange, but it's not all foreign exchange. So he said we have to be efficient when it comes to R&D, and we have to think about where we're going to sort of put, invest the money. I think one thing they had done to do with geopolitics and what we were talking about is kind of have duplicate resources because they weren't sure about, you have the Americans saying anything that's sold to America has to be made and designed in America. And then as they've kind of looked at where they can, they've kind of rationalised that and tried to streamline things a bit and shut down some facilities where they knew they were never going to, I suspect some of it in China, for instance, where it's a market that they've only got like a tiny share now, and they've kind of already cut some of the resources. They've probably pulled some of the R&D spending they were putting into that, but they have made a cut. So that is, I mean, it was that they were asked about it on the call. That's always something that's going to worry investors because there's always this sense of if you start doing that, you're kind of getting into that mode they were under Vestberg, where they eventually lost technology leadership, and then
they're fucked.
That Huawei had come in and sort of taken their lunch in 4G, and so. But I don't think they have done that. But it was cut for the first time.
So I suppose they are maybe in a more comfortable spot now, in that they have almost a captive market in many countries. The two vendors and the Chinese vendors as well in their own respective markets as well. That there isn't actually a huge like Open RAN as a hasn't materialized. So maybe they can
do it without being too worried. Like some markets Pernaving was saying to me, some markets it's only us and the Chinese aren't there, and some markets we're not allowed, and then occasionally the ones where they're all there, they still seem to be under quite a lot of price pressure. Like Latin America is like a bit of a nasty area for them at the moment. I think the whole of the Americas, they were down 11% year over year in the fourth quarter. So, and I think that was blamed on Latin America, where Huawei seems to just be going for them on try and win some market share.
I think anywhere Huawei isn't explicitly banned, it seems to do pretty well.
Better margins wise, basically. So, that's the big story is they haven't really grown sales. They've carried on cutting. They insist most of that's obviously coming in SG&A, not R&D. And it's like, how much further can you go with this? Because that's the thing that surprises me. It's just like companies seem to be able to run themselves with a much smaller workforce than they used to. And I asked Pernaving that, and he was like, he didn't want to say it's to do with AI, but he did use the word automation.
Well, anytime people streamline, AI's got to be the elephant in the room, hasn't it? I mean, I made a point.
Some people are more happy to admit to it these days, to be honest with you, because they think it's like that's what their investors want to hear. It depends if they're talking. If they're talking to the government, they'll never say it.
Well, investors quite like it when you sack people, don't they?
Investors love it, but governments don't like it.
Right, yeah.
So it depends who they're talking to. But if you're on an earnings call, they'll often go, I mean, Alison Coakley at BT does this all the time. She goes, we've cut this many jobs, and AI is like allowing us to realise efficiencies. It's like, you wouldn't be saying that if you were talking to a different group of people.
And a good example of that is if you look at Telefonica in Spain. So they've announced this last year huge round of layoffs, but obviously with the Spanish interest from a government perspective and the unions there's been a huge intervention there to try and prevent that, or at least mitigate against the scale of cuts that they initially planned. So a huge pushback there in Spain, almost kind of like what is happening with VW Group on the automotive side in Germany. The unions are pushing back and are very strong.
And that's one of the challenges Europe's always going to face. America, employment laws looser, isn't it?
I mean, on the revenue growth side, like their opportunities are there's some in Europe if this legislation goes through to get Huawei and ZTE out, but they're not banking on that. But it sounds like it's substantial if it's the market share as high as it is. Yeah. I mean, how profitable it is, I don't know, but it's like most of the profits seem to be getting made in North America. So,
Indeed.
But then other than that, he started off talking about physical AI and humanoid robots and smart glasses and all this stuff. And I mean, everybody's quite dubious about this at the moment. No one really knows whether that's actually because the telcos themselves will only spend if they're making money. Yeah. And so it's whether they can make any cash out of that stuff.
I think both Boyer and Per were just they constantly trying to paint this picture of, we were talking about all the peripherals and stuff earlier. They're kind of trying to paint this picture of everything being hyper-connected and AI being in there. And Luke was just talking about the latency implications of various agentic systems communicating with each other. And obviously, if that is real and you don't want those delays, then you do need a really robust wireless network. But it feels very long-term future on the media.
Long-term future, and also I'm not sure how much of that would be 5G anyway necessarily.
Yes.
And the telcos need to make some money. If they can't sell smart glasses to people or all these other systems that require that, then they're not going to be any more inspired to increase their capital intensity than they have been over the last few years.
And as we were saying with Luke earlier, most of those peripherals are not connected anyway.
Yeah, and
they're kind of out of the loop.
I think it's like the example, obviously Ericsson and others came out with this big noise about remote surgeries and all of this at the start of the 5G cycle.
This is the latest.
We've been taking the piss out of that for about a decade.
Things like that, obviously, will be done on a fixed network, not on, any random EE or O2 SIM or whatever. But I think, on the AI side, most of the upside potential at the moment is actually skewing towards the optical players.
Yes, totally.
So you look at Lumentum and these other players, they are obviously, it's the inter-data center layer that all of the traffic burden is going to. That's why, I am very suspect about people that are saying there's going to be a traffic explosion from AI. Most of that is in the middle mile or the east-west layer, not necessarily the RAN.
Completely.
Agreed.
And I think the other thing that I think is notable is the whole talk about APIs is now very muted.
It is.
It's like there almost seems to have been this realization that things like Aduna and Vonage are only really about things like fraud prevention and this whole it could have been more exciting than that. It's almost like they don't really want to get asked about it.
Well, Narvinger, when I chat to him, it was still trying to insist that you don't know what innovation is going to come on the back of it. I think I didn't put this in my story, but he mentioned 3G. And for most of the decade after 3G came out, it would look like a waste of time. And then the iPhone came along and Uber and all that stuff. Then suddenly everyone's like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it now. So I think that's the line that Ericsson's clinging to.
Yeah, but Ericsson didn't get it because they didn't make any more money out of that than they did out of 2G and 3G.
But Ericsson's point, and I'm just trying to represent what I think their position is, it isn't necessarily mine. Ericsson's point is this will happen, and this is the conclusion I made at the bottom of my piece about it today, and then we're going to have to wrap up in a minute, that you got to be patient and this shit will happen eventually. Now, obviously they say that every time and it's becoming, it's a bit like, okay, well, when?
Yeah, but I think the premise is a little bit flawed, to be honest with you, because the iPhone coming along and spurring data growth didn't lead to ARPU growth for the telcos.
Totally.
The thought, if you look at what Deutsche Telekom's ARPU in Germany for a contract customer in 2010 was 31 euros. It's 19 now.
Yes.
Okay, there's more users probably than there were in 2010. More people have mobile phones, but the price, what people are paying on average has come down a lot. It's become commoditized. So people using video services on their phones didn't help the telcos to make more money. Yeah.
And that's why I suppose I'd be very skeptical of this positioning of slicing on the consumer side. I think, okay, there's some green shoots.
A game slice. Who needs a game slice on 5G?
Or, a live streaming slice for uplink, which, we've seen monetized to some extent in Asia. AIS, China Telecom, others, but like transposing that in Europe or US, I think is very limited potential.
Yep.
I think most of the slicing opportunity, if any, is on the enterprise side. Things like slices for public services, chief priority in the US. The Norwegian Defence Forces have done similar with ICE. Campuses.
Yeah.
But the idea that consumers, I think, are going to be monetizable with slicing, I think, is far-fetched.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're close to wrapping up. It just occurred to me, Luke, I promised you before we started recording that we were going to talk about a whole other load of stuff that you've been doing with Ookla to do with indoor connectivity and that sort of thing, which we never got around to. I'm afraid we're not going to be able to. So
no worries.
We'll have to get back on another one.
Exactly.
Yes,
that just gives me the platform to say come back.
Thank you. Definitely.
And just let us know. So you're based in Ireland.
Based in Ireland, but I'm travelling the whole time.
Right.
We have an office in Dublin. And we're very globally focused, Ookla. Like we've kind of hired the best wherever. So yeah.
So yes, later on in the year, let's put a pin in that.
Definitely.
And
yes.
I promise
we'll
lead with it. There was just so much Europe stuff, and then we had that massive organic tangent at the start
on AI,
that we never got around to it.
Yeah.
So, but we will. And please do come back. It was a great chat.
I appreciate you having me.
It's a great chat, and honestly, I'm amazed at the amount of shit you managed to learn by age 23.
Don't know about that.
You put us to shame. So again, fair play to you. And it was great chatting to you. And if you've got a moment, join us for a pint.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Cool. All right. Yes. That's it for now. I was just wondering whether we got half done coming up, but that's a few weeks away. So yeah, we'll have a normal one next week. So thanks a lot for listening. Make sure you join us for that one.